There we go. All right. Welcome to the Board of Equalization. We are going to call this meeting to order. Our first item of business is public comment. Do we have anybody online? Okay. Do we have anybody in the room that wishes to speak for Board of Equalization? Nope. All right. We'll close public comment. Move on to the approval of Board of Equalization minutes. And I'd entertain a motion for that.
I move that we approve the minutes from the last meeting.
Second.
Okay. I have a motion and a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, that passes. 4.1.
Yes, we have 157 assessor and hearing officer recommendations for which we seek approval.
Okay. Entertain a motion.
So moved.
Okay, I have a motion and I have a second. I have a motion by Councilwoman, or actually it would be Board Member Suzanne Harrison, and seconded by Board Member Sheldon Stewart. And all in favor say aye.
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 Aye. Any opposed? Okay, that passes. Approval of significant adjustments.
Yes, we have 3 of those. As you'll recall, these are items that have had a 20% adjustment and $1 million. I'm happy to answer any questions about those. Otherwise, I'm seeking approval of those 3.
Okay, any questions on those? Hearing none?
Move to approve.
Okay.
Second.
I have a motion by Board Member Arlen Bradshaw and by Board Member Suzanne Harrison. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, that passes. And then 6.1.
Yes, this is a new item. Well, it's a reintroduction of late appeal items to the agenda. Many years ago, those were included in the assessor and hearing officer recommendations. There's a change by the tax commission rules where they would like to see this on the agenda. So we have late appeals, and we have a list of 12 for which we seek acceptance of the appeals for the reasons identified, and then 3 for dismissal because they failed to meet the late appeal guidelines. We seek approval of those items.
Okay. All right. Any questions on those? All right. Hearing none, I'd entertain a motion on those.
Motion to approve.
Okay. Motion to approve by Board Member D. Theodore.
Second.
Who wants it? Okay. A second by Board Member Arlen Bradshaw. All in favor say aye.
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 Aye. Any opposed? Okay, that passes. And 7.1.
This is our recommendation of exempt property. There are 5, 1 for a 50% grant of exemption and 4 denials.
Okay, questions on those? Hearing none, entertain a motion.
Move approval.
Okay, I have a motion by Board Member Suzanne Harrison. I have a second.
Second.
I have a second by Board Member D. Theodore. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, that passes. Any additional business before us?
No?
Okay, we'll see you next time.
All right.
All right, we'll adjourn this meeting without exception. Yes. Awesome. Oh, that's yours. There you go. Redevelopment. I have that right there, yeah. Ready? Okay, awesome. All right, welcome to the Redevelopment Agency meeting agenda. Is that you?
It is me, yeah.
I'm sorry.
That's all right.
That's not me.
I will call to order a meeting of the Redevelopment Agency of Salt Lake County. Are there any members of the public that would wish to address the board? None? All right, that takes us to our approval item. Is there a motion related to the August 13th minutes?
I move
Move.
approval.
I'll second.
I have a motion from Lori, a second from Sheldon. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And is that we have Amy online? All right, the minutes are approved. That takes us to our discussion item of our 2025 proposed budget, and I'll turn it over to Dina.
Great, thank you, Chairman Bradshaw. Sorry, I'm gonna get the mind shift. So Lauren, can you pull up the PowerPoint? Very, very brief. I did, while Lauren's pulling that up, I did hand out the RDA budget packet from Sherpa. So unfortunately, we submitted it to Granicus, but it didn't get pulled over for your packet. What you're going to see on the slides is basically exactly the same information in a slightly different format and with a little bit more information. So you can go to the next slide. So you can see at the top, we're looking at about a $1 million budget for the Redevelopment Agency in 2025. The revenue is derived from approximately $801,000 in tax increment. And just a reminder, we only have 2 project areas, both of which are located within Magna City. There's fund balance transfer of $184,000, and I'm happy to talk about the fund balances if you have a question about that. And then the estimated interest on fund balance. The expenditures are sort of listed there, but on the next slide, I've provided some detail about what those expenditures are made up of. So if you want to jump to the next slide, Lauren. So professional fees, that $50,000 was put into the budget to retain a consultant for development services on the 7 parcels that the Redevelopment Agency owns on Magna Main Street. Contract fees are for those items that you see listed there, and that includes the RDA administration and then property maintenance on those parcels, as well as 2 other parcels that are owned by the Redevelopment Agency within Magna City. Interlocal agreements, we have a current agreement with the Magna Water District in the Arbor Park project area. And then we have indirect costs. These are the standard, standard overhead and indirect costs that you see in all budgets. Capital expenditures, this was a placeholder for an 8th, there's another parcel on Main Street that is actually right in between the 7 that we own, that the RDA owns. So that was put in there in the event that there's an opportunity and the RDA board wishes to purchase that land. So we have it held there. And then intergovernmental charges are the funds from the tax increment that gets transferred to economic development to help cover the operational costs related to administering the RDA. So that's really it. The next slide is just questions if you have any about this.
I have some, if that's okay.
Laurie, go ahead.
So I know that Magna has asked for the RDA and for them to manage that and for that to be turned over at the end of this year. Where are we at on that? What are those discussions and what's going on with that?
So we received a letter from Adam Long, who's with Smith Harbison, who's the attorney for Magna City. They requested that the RDA be transferred in 90 days. And based on our experience with transferring RDAs to other jurisdictions that incorporate, it's about a year's time. Mill Creek is the last one we did, and that took about almost 11 months. So we responded to Magna City by letting them know we're also anxious to get this transfer to happen, but it won't happen in 90 days. It's just not possible to happen by the 22nd of January. So what the staff is proposing is that your December meeting, when you will adopt the budget, we will also have a resolution that triggers the transference of all of the documents and the agreements and the land and all of that. And so we'll start that process officially on the 10th of December and hoping to complete it at a pretty expedited schedule by the end of April if we can.
So this budget could change then.
Oh, the budget could absolutely change because honestly, we prepared this budget when we didn't think this would be going to Magna City. So there are things in this budget that will likely not get done. like, we're probably not going to be hiring a consultant to figure out how to develop those 7 parcels. If we did, we'd still do it in concert with Magna City. But with their desire to sort of take over management, I really expect very, very little of what we had been doing is going to be continued. But we do have to maintain all the agreements. We have to go through assignments of those agreements, property transfers. We just did enormous phase 1 and phase 2 environmental reports on the 7 properties that we own. So there's a lot of work that has to be done in terms of assigning those agreements and so forth. So yeah, and we're working with them. Our goal would be to get it done by the 30th of April, but really make sure we're wrapping this up completely before they experience the first day of sort of their next fiscal year, which would be July 1.
Okay.
So yeah.
All right, thank you.
Any other questions about that?
Well, Mr. Chairman, would it be appropriate to make a motion to set a public hearing?
It would.
Then I will, and I would set a public hearing for Tuesday, December 10th at 6 p.m. to receive public comment on the proposed 2025 budget.
And will you just include in that tentative approval of the budget as presented?
Pardon?
Will you just include that you approve of the budget as presented?
Oh, yeah, of course, yes.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right, we have a motion from Jim and a second from Suzanne. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any
Aye.
opposed? That's an aye from Amy. All right.
Thank you so
Thanks,
much.
Dina. And with that, if there's no other committee business, we will adjourn the RDA.
It's very quiet, yeah.
Lauren, council's not on. Council's not on here. It disappeared. No, because I won't be able to do it. It's okay, we can start and I'll see. We can start, I'm ready.
Okay, you ready? Okay, and you're ready as well?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, we'll call the meeting of the county council to order. Our first item in business is our Pledge of Allegiance. And let's see, who can we pick on today? Do you mind, Kaitlin, giving us the pledge today?
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Kaitlin. All right. Next item is public comment. Do we have anybody who wishes to speak today during public comment? Is there anybody online? Okay, if he jumps back on, let me know, and then we'll come back to him. So we'll leave public comment then, and we'll go on to our report of elected officials. Council, if you have anything that you would like to discuss this time, let's go ahead and do that now. Okay. Anything from council, go to our county mayor.
I do have a quick update on behalf of the mayor. Wanted to make them aware. Oh, Mayor Wilson,
There
did
she
you want to
is.
say something?
Well, I just want to say hi, everyone. Yes, Erin has the report today, but I'll be participating virtually. I'm in Boston at an ACO conference.
Awesome.
Just wanted to make you aware there's a re-entry simulation that is scheduled for Thursday, November 21st from 9 to 11 a.m. We're going to be hosting this. It's an exercise that allows policymakers, provider agencies, community members, and other professionals to experience the barriers that individuals face when they're attempting to re-enter our community following either a bout of homelessness or incarceration. Participants are assigned various roles, and they have opportunities for every 6 to 8 minutes to experience what an individual experiencing this situation would in a week. We go through 6 weeks. It's an opportunity for you to understand the barriers that those folks experience in trying to re-enter our society. At the end of the simulation, we typically do an opportunity for feedback and for people to share what that experience was like, and also brainstorm opportunities to improve the system. So we've offered this 5 different times over the course of the last year and have had over 200 participants. So if you'd like to join us, we'd love to have you join us for that opportunity. It really is eye-opening to experience what someone in that situation would be experiencing. We have a Lights On at the Eccles coming up next Monday, the 25th of November from 5:30 to 7:30. I believe you all should have received an invitation. This is an opportunity to celebrate the season with the lighting of an installation called Tree of Light. It's an art installation by Eric Warner, and we'd encourage you all and welcome you to come downtown for the Lights On ceremony for this beautiful exhibit. I want to remind everyone that open enrollment is happening right now, and it ends this Friday, November 22nd. So encourage everyone to please log on and go through that process. We have a Juniper Canyon Trail Connection ribbon cutting tomorrow, the 20th at 4 o'clock at 4094 West Autumn Springs Drive in Harriman. And this is to celebrate the opening of the Juniper Canyon Trail Connection. Next is an opportunity I want to share to appreciate and thank 2 of our employees who have saved some lives over the last few weeks. So our West Jordan Senior Center staff saved an individual. An elderly resident was checking in at the West Jordan Senior Center. He collapsed and fell backwards, losing consciousness. Amber, our center manager, quickly came to his aid. They called 911. She checked his airway and pulse, which was faint and weak. He stopped breathing. She administered CPR and was able to get him breathing again until first responders arrived. So we could just not be prouder of our West Jordan staff for their quick and decisive action in saving this participant's life. A relative called the center later that day and spoke with Paul. She's reported he's in the ICU, but expected to make a full recovery. And then also one of our aquatics managers at Holiday Lions, Kirby Owen, was honored with a public service award from the Utah Department of Corrections for his life-saving actions. This is while he was off duty. So Kirby responded to an AP&P agent who was experiencing a heart attack. He administered CPR for more than 8 minutes until the EMTs arrived. And we are incredibly proud and extend our gratitude to our lifeguards for their exceptional training, dedication, and life-serving expertise. So a couple of heroes on our staff that we wanted to highlight and show appreciation for today. Thank you.
That's awesome. Yeah, go ahead.
Please let those amazing staff members know of our appreciation as well. That's just really, really encouraging news. And we wish those folks the best in their recovery. I just wanted to give a shout out for the simulation, reentry simulation. Council member Dee Theodore and I had participated in the last one. It's really
I was there.
instructive and eye-opening. I'm sure, I don't know if you've also.
I was there.
Oh, yeah, sorry.
Same time you were.
Sorry.
But I didn't go to jail, so I was good.
It's early. It's early. Forgive me. Forgive
No,
me,
it's okay.
Councilwoman. Several of us participated in the reentry program, and it's just really eye-opening about how some of the barriers and some of the things that all of us take for granted can really be difficult for people to overcome in getting on a path to success after interfacing with our correctional system. So I just encourage folks to participate if they can.
I was going to say, you probably didn't see me because you get paranoid after the first time around and you realize they're going to come pick you up someplace or get you someplace or whatever else. And so I started like sliding my way around and hiding out and figuring out places I could go. In the process, I'm like, I'd be a great homeless person. I did not end up in jail or in a bad place once. So no, it was it was really rough. It was kind of an interesting experience to kind of go through that. And that's one of the things I know Dee and I talked about at the end of it was that little bit of paranoia that started to set in as you're trying to not get caught, it was kind of a frustrating thing.
Right.
So
And I try to just remind people and layer on, imagine it's 30 degrees outside and
Oh,
you
yeah.
don't have a coat. And I mean, there's so many factors to be considered. So I appreciate your participation and thank you for encouraging people to join the opportunity.
Aaron, can I ask a question? I understand there might be some staffing changes that would affect perhaps future simulations. Do you know, is this maybe our last opportunity, or do you think there will be a future opportunity? Because I haven't done it and I want to, but I can't do it on Thursday.
I think we'll be discussing that. Yeah, our former staff person, Amy Stock, who ran this program, has been hired by Salt Lake City to take on a full-time position regarding homelessness. So we will be revisiting that, and our hope would be to offer it. We may not be able to offer it 5 times a year, but maybe once or twice. But I think the ongoing education component of it is really important. So we'll make sure you're aware and try to schedule for an opportunity that you can join us. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
sounds like we need a partnership with Salt Lake City to run ours on a quarterly basis. Thank you. Okay. All right, anything from our other elected county officials that wish to speak at this time? Okay, hearing none, we'll move into our work session, 4.1, proposed hire report, incentive plans. Oh, did our person come back on? No, okay. All right, proposed hire report, incentive plans 3,000 and under, and our weekly reclassification. Our presenter is Hua Nguyen, our council budget and policy analyst. Welcome, Hua.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning. This week we have 18 positions listed. There's no incentive plan under 3,000, but we do have 2 reclassifications from the health department. It reclassified an incumbent time-limited social worker to a time-limited home visiting program manager, 1 grade higher. This is a grant-funded position, so the increase will be absorbed by the grant. It also reclassified a vacant public health nurse to a vital records specialist, 5 grades lower.
Was that position previously grant funded as well, or I'm just curious?
Public health nurse,
Yeah.
I'm not sure on this one.
Not the first one that is
The
grant
first
funded,
one is a grant-funded position.
but it was being transferred, reclassified. Was the original position grant funded, or what that was sitting there, or was it just?
Yes, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. If the council doesn't have any question on this, that's all I have to report today.
Okay,
Thank you.
You're good. It's not a problem. No problem. Okay. Our next item is the Salt Lake County Jail Capacity Update. So we'll turn the time over to Sheriff Rosie Rivera and Chief Deputy Matt Dumont. Just gave you the hot
Good
seat
morning.
today.
And you all know Chief Dumont, he's actually going to be doing the presentation, but I just wanted to explain why we had a separate agenda. We usually just add this to our budget And we felt that there might be more questions, so we wanted to have a little bit of time. So we had a different agenda. So this is why it's on here today.
Great. Thank you very much. Matt Dumont, Chief Deputy for the Salt Lake County Corrections Bureau. Our capacity has changed for the first time in about 5 years. The purpose for the change is our need to transition one of our general population housing units to a subacute mental health unit. I think it's probably comes as no surprise that we're seeing an increase in mentally ill individuals in terms of numbers and degrees, and in the Salt Lake County Jail. And this transition of one 64-bed housing unit was a result of that. So our rated capacity continues to be 2,455. That's the total number of beds that we have in the jail. But what changes our operational capacity. So we in prior years, we were at 2,165. With the transition from a general population to a subacute housing unit, our operational capacity is now 2,101. And that's the primary change that would require the resolution. Are there any questions?
Questions from council?
I just have a question. How does staffing change? Are those folks that are working in the subacute mental health space different qualifications? Are there more medical folks?
Yeah, they're from our health services division, and so they're trained. Once they get up there, we try to get them into the CIT program as quickly as possible. What really changes is the operation. In a general population housing unit, we do hourly watch tours or just checks. We check on every prisoner in the area. In a subacute area, that's every 30 minutes. So the duties change a bit, but the staffing does not. You're welcome.
Okay.
I have a question.
Go ahead, Ann.
Can you give us an idea of how, once the CMS Medicaid 1115 waiver, is that going to help at all with staffing?
What that will allow us to do is we'll be able to bill for medical and mental health services the last 90 days of someone being incarcerated. So in terms of staffing, I think it's more of a budget issue. We would see funding coming from Medicaid as opposed from, we would be able to bill for many of those services. Staffing wise, I suppose that in terms of the resources to fund staffing, it should make a difference.
But if they're in less than 90 days, that doesn't factor in, correct?
Well, as many things are with Medicaid, it depends.
Mhm.
If they're under the age of 21, or if they were involved in foster care and under the age of 26, then they would be Medicaid eligible. If they spend 24 hours, I know more about Medicaid than I ever thought I would. If they spend more than 24 hours admitted in a hospital, then that is Medicaid.
So you can access funds under certain circumstances not attached to the 90 days.
That is correct.
Okay,
That
thank
is
you.
correct.
And do we have a group that actually goes after that for the jail when we're dealing with that with our residents?
We have a very outstanding billing department in our health services division.
Okay.
That handles all of the medical billing, and then if something is, if a service is Medicaid eligible. The big difference is that services while someone's in jail will now be Medicaid eligible, where currently it's not.
Okay. Other questions?
I think for me, it would be very helpful after budget to maybe have a presentation on how this new waiver could help us with care delivery, what changes it might mean, how it could help our inmates and our staff with various things. So
I'd be very happy to provide that. It is going to change, I think, the types of services and the number of services that we'll be able to provide. We're still working very closely with the state Medicaid office we're the beta test for the rest of the state. We anticipate that we'll be kicking off in July. But it's still very much a work in progress.
So maybe, Madam Chair, when we get closer, I would love to get a briefing for the
That'd be
council
great.
on how that might help you and help our inmates get the care they need.
Great.
And Madam Chair,
Yes, go ahead.
I just would add that we all recognized when we were moving forward with the idea of the bond, the need for more mental health support services. So as we look over the next couple of weeks at next steps, and I'm being asked by many, and we'll be working with my team along with the sheriff's office to look at what's possible given the bond didn't make it over the finish line. But I think with additional revenue, I heard you just say, Matt, that we will be bringing, it sounds like consistent staffing, just different intervals of checking in, but will we want to look at more mental health specific staff on site? What might that look like? So I think it's yet another piece of improving our operations. And how would we apply that additional revenue? And could we run through your finance team an analysis on what we might expect in terms of additional revenue?
Madam Chairman, I want to congratulate your team for being the pilot project for the state. The information that you've supplied and the statistics are going to be key to getting this waiver accepted. So thank you, thank you.
You're welcome. Our health services division administrator Rob Ballard has been very much in the decision making, and he's the expert for us, and becoming more of an expert than I think he anticipated. So
That often happens. All right. Any other questions from council? Okay. Well, there is a consideration of a resolution setting forth the maximum operational capacity for the Salt Lake County Jail. You will have it before you. I will just entertain a motion.
Move to approve.
I have a motion. Do I have a second? I have a motion and a second. All in favor say aye.
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 Okay. Any opposed?
Opposed.
Okay. All right. That passes. All right. Our next item is 4.4. Thank you. Our 2025 budget workshop under the direction of Dave Del Quadro and our council fiscal manager and Trois Nguyen, our council budget and policy analyst. So, and we're actually gonna, we pushed to this week our council budget. So if we don't mind teeing that up first, and then we'll then go down through the list, if that's all right.
You bet. So as a reminder, what we asked in the 2025 proposed budget was for an increase of about $112,000 for fringe benefits, health and retirement related, and the mayor included that in her proposed budget. So that's the baseline against which we have for 2025.
Okay. All right.
Madam Chair.
Yes, go ahead, Amy.
Thank you. As we all know, it's an incredibly tight budget year, and all of our independent electeds and those in the mayor's portfolio have cut back on spending, and we're asking them to do more with less through this budget process. Especially seeing that the public safety bond didn't pass, we have some difficult decisions this year and then moving forward. And to that end, I think it's important that the council look long and hard at our own office expenses to find ways we can be more effective and efficient. We've had discussions over the past week about a council office restructuring, so I'd like to make a motion to that effect. This is a long motion, so I emailed all of you this motion yesterday if you need to follow along. I move that we reduce our FTEs in the council office by 4, and that we reduce our budget by $450,000 from the mayor's proposed budget. As part of this motion, it's the intent of the council that the 9 FTEs in the council budget that are currently designated as senior policy advisors be restructured in the following way. 4 FTEs associated with the senior policy advisor position are eliminated. Beginning in the 2025 budget, there will be a new central staff position dedicated to whomever is council chair and will be hired by the entire council. The remaining 4 FTEs are to be designated so that each political caucus of the council with 3 or more members is authorized to hire 2 senior policy advisors, each of whom shall serve their respective caucus rather than an individual council member. The selection of senior policy advisors by political caucuses of the council should be selected by the respective caucuses as they will be constituted on January 6th, 2025, and should be communicated by the applicable caucus leader to the county council and council staff, with the goal of selecting and hiring caucus senior policy advisors to fill the remaining 4 FTEs prior to January 1st, 2025, the first date of the new fiscal year. The ability of individual council members to hire individual senior policy advisors is not authorized in the 2025 budget. Council staff shall make recommendations to the council for any county-wide or internal policy changes necessary to implement this direction and shall bring those recommendations to the council for consideration and approval. Finally, as part of this motion, the council authorizes the availability of funds in its budget to provide severance pay to any current senior policy advisors whose positions are eliminated in the 2024 budget if each of the following conditions are met. First, the departing senior policy advisor was not appointed by a council member with a term of office expiring on January 6, 2025. Second, the departing senior policy advisor is not transferred or rehired to another full-time position within the county prior to February 1st, 2025. And third, the council and the departing senior policy advisor agree to severance consistent with the process outlined in applicable countywide HR policy. That concludes my motion.
Okay. So we have a motion on the floor. Do we have a second for that motion?
Second.
Discussion of the motion.
We're going to have discussion, absolutely.
I second it.
And so we have a second, now we're going to have discussion. All right. You want to go first?
Personally, for me, when I ran for this office, one of the things I committed to do was act independently and not be taken action upon me, as it's stated in the optional plan. For me personally, I made the decision to run knowing that I would have the support of a senior policy advisor for the full 4 years of my term so I can adequately represent the members of the southwest area of the community. And I will not be able to do that. I also know members that are currently duly elected ran on those same understandings. It's also, to talk about it, an optional plan specifically states that we should be independent of any other office. When we share policy advisors, we cannot be independent. We have to balance the priorities against the other members of our caucus. And then many times we do disagree with our members of our caucus. For me, I have made this decision so that I can maintain employment. I am not able to adequately serve the members of my community without this type of position dedicated in my office. They represent me in different committees that I'm unable to attend because of the full-time job status. So with that, if this is done, at least you should make the effective date of some type of policy like this when terms end for the individuals that ran on the premise that they would have this type of support. With a $2 billion budget and the duties and responsibilities of this council as it relates to the budget that Council Member Winder Newton stated, we as members have a fiscal duty to the residents of this county. And by cutting staff, we limit our ability to serve that fiscal role and that legislative role adequately. Therefore, I will not support this type of motion. I know it's been stated that we should act like the state legislator. Well, I noted that there's 175 employees that are dedicated to the state legislator. We have a total of 104 elected members of the state legislature. That ratio is 1.68. In today's environment, our legislative branch has a 1.55 staff member. We are lower than the state legislature in this type of support in this important role. And I am not sure the total reasons, but I'm not going to state anything more than that. That is my statement.
Madam Chairman, I'd like to speak.
Yep, go ahead, Ann.
For the last several months, Darren Casper and Dave Del Quadro have been very, very proactive in informing us of the tight budget that we have. They have worked diligently to spread the pain of a tight budget across the entire elected departments. Every elected office in this county is committed to doing the very best possible job that they can for our constituents. When we ask them to make cuts in their contra, when we ask them to phase back on their operational costs, when we ask them to make sacrifices within their offices and with their employees, it would be completely disingenuous if the council were not willing to take on the same type of responsibility and look for areas within our budget that we could make the same type of cuts that we are asking every other office to do. I thank Amy for bringing this forward. It's an excellent proposal. It shows that the council is part of the general county and that we are willing to take on the same type of responsibilities.
All right, other discussion.
I also, from my long tenure as a council person, have been able to see the productivity of policy advisors over time. Clearly, we all know some are better than others in terms of providing services to their elected official. What I have seen is that at times there are opportunities to go off the rails, so to speak, in terms of what activity is taking place really is productive for the county and the citizens of Salt Lake County. I believe that increasing the professionalism of the policy advisors is in the exactly right direction we need to go. I also believe that policy advisors could represent their collective caucuses in a very, very positive way. I also see this as an opportunity to increase the proficiency of the policy advisor's role in making decisions that are extremely important. It is true that when any of us ran, we said, okay, we get to hire a policy advisor. What that meant to each individual elected official was probably quite different. Some interpreted that to mean that they were, I don't want to say servant, but that anything was fair in terms of what they were supposed to provide service to the council member. Some questionable in terms of does that really benefit the people of Salt Lake County? Probably not in many cases. But those that have, I believe, shined and made a productive contribution to the process do so because they're dedicated to the position. And I see this as a way, yes, it is quite different, but I see it as a way of increasing the professionalism of the policy advisors. And I also see it as an opportunity for council members to get more engaged at times in terms of the decision-making process. When you run for this office, you're not saying, okay, I got a policy advisor, so I don't necessarily have to show up too much. I'll let them do it. That's not the right attitude. If that's the attitude, don't run for the office. So anyway, I think it's good, but I would ask Amy to make one consideration and for the council members also to consider this. Given the fact that there would be a reduction in the number of policy advisors and the way they serve the council, we're going to have a extremely good staff. And I think that we need to look at probably making a pay scale that's more appropriate in terms of being able to attract the type of people we want. I think it's extremely important that our policy advisors probably are on the same par as appointed elected officials, deputies, for instance. There's a marker. And to that end, I would suggest that rather than reduce the council budget $450,000, we reduce it only $400,000 to give us a little more revenue there to see what we need to do in terms of attracting the right talent. That still provides a significant savings in terms of what we're spending on this, and I think that it also increases the efficiency and makes us a better council. So,
Madam Chair,
would you consider the 400,000 rather than the 450 reduction?
Amy, go ahead.
yeah, thank you. I'm happy to consider that. I will tell you, reducing the for FTEs, I believe, is about a $540,000 savings. And so the 450 actually gives us some room to work with on that. If the council feels like we need to just do 400, I'm fine with whatever you guys all decide.
And maybe because we are looking at having to pay out on some of the people who will not be
Severance and
coming
stuff.
back, the severance. I think just for this one time, it makes sense not to take the full amount and to go to 400. We had a chance to speak quickly with Dave before the meeting, and that sounded like that would give us enough room. It's going to be a tight budget no matter what we do, but that gives him just a little bit of wiggle room. We don't have to spend it if we don't need to. So that's the idea.
Great. I'll go ahead and amend my motion to reduce the budget amount to 400,000.
Okay. So the
Madam
motion.
Chair,
Yeah, go
may
ahead.
I make one other comment while I'm unmuted?
Yeah, go ahead.
There is no other part-time elected official in the state of Utah on the state, county, or city level that gets to elect their own full-time employee. Even legislative assistants in the Utah State Senate work for between 3 to 8 senators each. And city council members throughout the state generally all share one employee if they even get one. So just wanted to add that as well to the dialogue. Thank you.
Okay, yep, go ahead.
I'll just say that I do agree with Councilmember Newton's motion, and I support it. When I first came in and my first election, I actually didn't even realize I got a policy advisor until someone told me. So I didn't know. I learned I did, and I actually went through different scenarios of trying not to actually use one. So, and my situation is different from others. I get that. So there's some advantages, disadvantages, I guess. But at the same time, my goal coming in, along with another council member, was to try and save taxpayer money. So, and that was by reducing my staff, our staff. And so that's been kind of a goal of mine, and we haven't always been in a position to do so. But we are in a tight budget year, as you've heard, as we know here at the county. And so this does make sense at this time. I think we have a good motion here that will be effective for the council, so I do support it. Thank you.
Okay.
Madam Chair?
Yes, go ahead.
So just a few thoughts. I mean, I think there's been few issues in my time on the council that have inspired so much discussion and emotion as I've experienced talking about this over the last week. And it has made it a struggle to determine, how I wanted to approach this today. I mean, the reality is the council is staffed in a way that largely the same as the 3 commissioners were staffed before the change in the form of government, in terms of that, what we used to call the AAs, the administrative assistants. And I'm in the unique position, which I sometimes bring up, that I have served both in that role and as a member of the council. And so it has provided me, I think, a unique perspective. For 2 of the years, I served as an AA. 2 of those years were as aide to the chair when Joe Hatch was the chair. So I also understand to some degree what that particular role entails. I do think the council would be best served if we had an aide that was more administrative and central staff, as I believe is envisioned by the motion. Discussions about if we should change or restructure council staffing have occurred many times behind the scenes throughout the years. And often those discussions don't go very far because it's determined that the timing isn't right. And, I think timing is definitely something to consider. It was pointed out to me, actually, that, as recently as June, when we adopted the policy related to the senior policy advisors, that there was legislative intent that kind of seemed to double down on the fact that we would be keeping the current system. and maybe that would have been the appropriate time to propose a change. I think prior to candidate filing might have been a better time so that the candidates were best prepared to know what the situation would be when they join the council. And I wish that we'd had these discussions earlier. I think in a perfect world, having a longer runway would be the way to go. It's hard to determine at what point this would be the least disruptive, though. I'm sympathetic to, should we have this effective at the end of the current term prior to the next election? Should we have a transition period where some members are grandfathered potentially? And all of that to me is kind of delaying the decision. And if I were to take a step back, remove all of the personalities involved, and look at what I feel would be a better way and a more efficient way to staff the council, I have to accept that the reality is that the proposal that Amy has made makes a lot of sense. And even though I have emotions and I in no way want to be punitive towards the current members of this council or the new members who will join us in January, I've decided that I will support the motion because of the fact that I believe it's a better way to staff the council going forward. So thank you, Madam Chair.
All right. Anybody else wishes to speak? Go ahead.
I'm going to counter. Ever since I've gotten on this council, my policy advisor has been has been under attack. And I'm making that public now, even before I got on this council, by particular the member that has made this motion. With this motion, what happens, we have Ann Granado leaving, Jim Bradley leaving, and Dave Alvord. Those are 3 policy advisors. There's a 4th policy advisor, and I guarantee you that my policy advisor is that 4th policy advisor. There is no fairness in this. This is a direct attack on my policy advisor. It goes against the optional plan, which may only be altered by a vote of the people in Salt Lake County. So I believe that we need to take that $400,000 and reserve it for legal, because I do believe that there will be legal challenges against this. I believe these actions, again, are discriminatory, and that you are going to create disparate impact upon the members of our community. The Southwest, once again, will be ignored. The Southwest, once again, will not receive the proper support that it needs, because the will of this council will drive those funds to the east and the north of this county. We will no longer see that support. We have incoming members that relied upon this. And for us as a legislative branch to be this negligent to our duty, we state that we are trying to save money, but what we have done is we've effectively cut ourselves from being able to effectively manage our budgets, to manage our funds, and to manage our monies. And in results to the contras were all restored with this budget. They were not maintained. They were not kept in place. We do have items that we will discuss, but they were restored as it's stated in this budget. That's my statement.
Mitch, do you mind talking about the legality of the optional plan and what, I'm just curious what your take on that is.
So the optional plan does mention council staff. It doesn't reference any specific position. It provides that the council may hire merit and merit exempt staff as is appropriate. I can get into, if it's helpful for the council, the history of the senior policy advisor position, at least is how it's established in law. And I don't want to belabor anything that's not necessary, but there is a specific reference in the County Personnel Management Act to merit exempt employees, a certain category, and one of them is an administrative assistant to members of the county executive or county legislative body if one is assigned. Similar language is reflected in county ordinance about the ability of certain elected officials to hire deputies, and that administrative assistant position, if authorized in the budget, is mentioned in a particular section of county ordinance. So there is this notion that if, as a part of a budgetary decision, the council authorizes individual members of the council to hire an administrative assistant now referred to as a senior policy advisor because of a change in job description in 2015, that position would be allowed and it would be merit exempt. But I have not been able to identify a specific provision that states each member of the council is entitled to hire a specific aide. It's a core budgetary decision that the council has to authorize.
I may just offer one other observation.
Go ahead, Jim.
To suggest that the southwest quadrant of this county has been ignored and somehow they're in a siege mentality, I think is totally unrealistic or fair. I personally serve the southwest quadrant like you do, Laura, and the other at-large member. And to say that, that's out of sight, out of mind just isn't fair at all. Those people vote for me and vote for you, just like the council members who have districts get voted in. And more so than maybe any perception that the southwest quadrant somehow is always a stepchild to the eastern part of this county. It just isn't fair. I mean, I spent a great deal of time out there working on equestrian park issues, working on 4-H issues, and that's really the hub of those activities take place, as well as we've been generous in terms of accommodating the growth that's taking place there. I would say maybe it's not so much that, maybe it's just simply the candidates the southwest quadrant elects. You have to look at that as well.
Okay. Well, any additional discussion? If I don't hear any, then we will take a vote. Would you do a roll call vote on this? There you go. Thank you.
Councilmember Theodore,
Aye.
Councilmember Winder Newton,
Aye.
Councilmember Bradley. Aye. Councilmember Stewart,
No.
Councilmember Granado,
Aye.
Councilmember Harrison,
No.
Councilmember Bradshaw,
Aye.
Councilmember Stringham.
I'm going to couch this a little bit. I've had a chance to really look at this specifically, and this has been a very difficult, really difficult, because at this point, this motion has passed, so I'm going to make that clear. So my vote doesn't matter in this count. I've had to actually stand back and say, if I were looking at restructuring this office specifically and not look at personalities, not look at people, if I were going to do this from the very beginning, how would I want to do it? And I think there are pros and cons to what we're doing in both scenarios, to be honest. But because of the budget constraints right now, I'm a yes.
And Councilmember Alvord is excused, correct?
Yes. Thank you. Okay, that passes.
Madam Chair, I'm going to turn the time over to Visit Salt Lake and invite Kaitlin and Dan Hayes to come up, and I'll give you the table.
Good morning. Good morning. Thank you for having us this morning. We will try to be as brief as possible, but we'll let Dan go ahead and kick it off. We're going to do a mutual presentation here, so hopefully 2 birds, 1 stone.
Thank you, Kaitlin. And thank you to the council for providing us the time to go through our 2025 budgets. I'm really proud to be once again sitting here at this table, and especially like last year with Visit Salt Lake, who is our most significant partner in the business that we do. And I love that we are combining our presentations and coming closer together as organizations. Can you hit the next one for me? Josh Ambrose, who is my director of finance, he's going to do most of the presentation today, but I did want to start out with just a little bit of celebration and award. The Salt Palace Convention Center in 2024 was awarded or received 2 separate awards this year. The first was the Stella Award for the best convention center in the Southwest. This award itself is one that's voted on by about 3,500 different planners in the industry. And I'm extremely proud of my team to have been nominated and then to actually win the highest award for it. So we're extremely, like I said, proud of the team. They're an amazing group of people that I get to work with every day. And they do an awesome job. And their commitment to the venue, to its guests, and to Salt Lake County is very high. So thank you for that opportunity to do the work. The second award that we received was the Utah Business Green Business Award for Waste and Recycling. This specifically is about our landfill diversion process, both at the Salt Palace Convention Center and the Mountain America Expo Center. We're currently tracking at about a 50% diversion rate at the convention center, a little bit lower at the Expo Center. So we were honored to also receive that award by the Utah Business Magazine. So just a couple of points of celebration. With that, I'm going to turn some time over to Josh, and we'll get on to the presentation.
My job over the next few slides is very easy. I'm just here to show you why I'm so passionate and excited for both of these venues, Salt Palace in downtown and the Mountain America Exposition Center in Sandy. So I wanted to just start with just explaining the impact of a single event. So KubeCon we had last week, and at the Salt Palace, we had about 630 rented building square feet. So this was a very large event, 630,000 square feet of square face that was rented for this event. It brought over 40,000 hotel room nights, and from those attendees, that contributed to $11 million in economic impact. That's spending from those attendees that we calculated through the EIC model that Visit Salt Lake prepared for us. Those hotel room nights were 9,600 attendees, and the show itself separate of that 11 million spent $4 million in food over a 3-day period. Highlights for the Salt Palace: 13% of our contracts this year to date for the events this year required at least 500,000 square foot. And we have multiple things that happen in our building all the time, but those are huge events that we're hosting at the Salt Palace. 54% of all of our events came through sales leads that came through Visit Salt Lake. So we're very thankful of our partnership with Visit Salt Lake, and we wouldn't have been able to bring in these shows without Visit Salt Lake. We're estimated this year to end the year with 131 events on our calendar so far.
Sorry, Josh, just a couple of things. I do want to point out that 13% of contracts that requires really the full facility, that translates to somewhere between 80 to 100 days a year. And again, that's not counting the other multiple use times when we might have 2 or 3 events that are occupying a full facility.
Mountain America, about 10% of all individual contracts are at near full facility use. It's exciting in Mountain America. 162 estimated events in 2024, and we've identified that there is an opportunity for growth for economic impact at Mountain America through our continued partnership with Visit Salt Lake to bring in more sporting shows down to Sandy. Revenues have exceeded 2019. 2019 was a all-time high record for us pre-COVID. And combined Mountain America and Salt Palace, we are now normalizing above COVID levels. So we're excited that our revenues are increasing year over year, and we're very optimistic that this will continue to increase into the next few years as well. Bookings is interesting. So what we've seen is during COVID, booking levels have dropped. And then 21, 22, and 23, we've kind of seen this rebound activity for sales and bookings. And on 24, we're normalizing above 2019 levels. But what we're seeing is that the building, almost every single month, I think towards the end of 2027, is booked at full facility at the Salt Palace. So there isn't much space to book. And most of our sales activities is about 2 years out into the future. So we're very lucky that we have a very strong calendar of events in our system. Next thing I want to do is I want to talk about the changing demographics and just highlight our attendees who show up to these events. Before that, just acknowledging that the inflation growth is decreasing year over year. Unemployment is slightly increasing year over year. That impacts us because most of our attendees at the Salt Palace specifically are business professionals who fly in for our events. What we're seeing attendee-wise, 2019 was an amazing year for the Salt Palace. We had 1 million attendees. We haven't quite recovered there yet, and international travel hasn't recovered. Mountain America has basically recovered from pre-COVID levels. So what we're seeing is that the local attendees showing up to shows has recovered, and that seems to have strengthened. But we're still recovering from the international attendees, and that's changed the way that we strategize in bringing in events to our buildings. So I took this picture this year. This is Comic-Con, the Salt Palace, and the building was full. And I have a separate video.
It's crazy.
Yeah, the building was full. I have a video of guests walking in, like, to the halls once the event opened, and for about 20 seconds, like, people are coming in this other, like, new crowd that just continues, and that crowd doesn't go away. It's crazy. And at Salt Palace, I'm gonna just go back a slide, but what we're seeing this year in 24 is Mountain America and the Salt Palace have about similar attendees. And Mountain America is a much smaller venue. So that's amazing that Mountain America is able to bring in that much attendance in a single year. Most of the Salt Palace's attendees are out of state because we work with Visit Salt Lake. We bring in tourists that fly from out of state and stay in hotel rooms to attend the Salt Palace. Most of the attendees that go to Mountain America are either local, meaning county attendees, or state out of counties attendees, and small amounts of out of state attendees. And I just broke that down so that you guys can see what those numbers look like. I think it's a powerful message that there's this much activity at Mountain America, and I invite you guys to come to an event at Mountain America and just try to find parking. So who is our attendee? Gen Z has officially taken boomers in the workforce, and that scares me as a millennial. The average age of our attendee is also decreasing, and that tends to make sense. The workplace is changing as well. So, conclusion on our side at Salt Palace, tourism and local attendees remain strong across both venues and continue to recover and grow. Sales outlook is positive with a strong booking calendar going to 2027, and we're very thankful for that. Understanding how the attendee demographics are changing allows us to provide better recommendations to show's guest experience. For example, we have AI stores that are self-service stores on both buildings, and we can make smarter decisions about how we manage our venues, understanding what shows and what attendees are attending these shows. ASM Global will continue to hold both venues to high standards in anticipation of more world-class event awards. Now, before I hand it over to Visit Salt Lake, I'm going to go over the capital projects and our operating fund very briefly. At the Salt Palace, we have in budget for new firewalls. We need to upgrade our firewalls. We have lots of events come in. I think one of them this year was like a Red Hat hackers group. So we have to make sure that we have software appropriately at the Salt Palace to support the types of events that we bring in. Escalator upgrades. We have some escalators that are, and Dan can correct me if I'm wrong here, but that are going 27 years in age. Yeah. And they're falling apart, and we keep spending more and more and more money each month from our operating funds, just trying to keep our escalators going. Facility capital maintenance, that's just what I also talked about. Salt Palace is getting old, and there are just more costs related to just keeping the building up rather than operating the building, and these funds historically have come out of operating funds, and we're looking to use capital funds for the capital maintenance of capital equipment. The South Tower elevator rebuild, $800K there. Dan, do you want to speak to that?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. So we have three primary elevators that come out of our south parking structure. This is really the entrance for folks into our venue, as you might expect. Two of those have been renovated, all new mechanical inside, as well as front of house. The finishings themselves have been improved. This last elevator is actually located in the tower. It's the primary elevator that the Hyatt Hotel guest uses to gain access from the parking structure to the hotel. And we would like to do the same work in that space. And then finally, I'll just talk really quickly. The key card access system, this is moving away from a traditional keyway to one that is an electronic card that each individual meeting room can be programmed to, so that meeting planner can instead of walking around with a ring of 50 keys and having keys go missing and then become copied, we can control it much more from a security perspective, and also save a lot of time with respect to recoring of rooms and things like that.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
On this particular one, is there a backup when power's out and things like that? You got to get things out of a locked room?
Sure. I don't know all the details of this exact system yet. Often our critical systems in our venue operate with a UPS, an uninterrupted power system that has a backup battery structure to it that will last a certain number of hours. We do have an emergency generator that operates critical systems in the event power goes out. Whether or not this is attached to that system, I don't completely know, and whether or not you can't bypass it with a traditional keyway might also be possible.
I think it's really important that you have access to those when those scenarios take place. So let's make sure whatever we put in, you have access to one way or the other, and there's a backup. So.
Have you had a personal experience?
Oh, yes.
Okay. I thought maybe.
State Republican Convention.
Oh, okay.
Not pretty.
Not pretty.
We couldn't get access to the room with all of the stuff to set up for over an hour because they lost the key. Wow. No, it was not pretty.
Okay. I have really good staff. We can get into things if we.
They did not get in for a long time, so there was some major issues
Call Dan on
going
his cell phone.
Yeah, we'll get there.
No, they were trying to get him in. Believe me, I've heard about it over and over and over and over again. So.
Won't allow that.
Boy.
We went till midnight. That's why. It was a long, long, long convention.
Yeah.
And that is one of the things they keep pointing back to. And then pointing at me. So
Okay.
let's make sure we have a really good system for that and a backup system.
100%.
Please,
We will
please,
prepare
please.
for that. Moving on very quickly to the Mountain America Expo Center, a couple items here. Looking for about $135,000 for an FF&E. So we really want to make a major replacement of some of the chairs, as well as some of the riser equipment at the Expo Center. We also do have an HVAC mechanical upgrade that we need to make with one of the chiller components there. We do have two freight elevators actually at the Mountain America Expo Center. Most folks probably don't see those, but we do have a valve issue with one of them that needs to be replaced. And then we are looking to update the Mountain America surveillance cameras. We went through a pretty good update this year at the Salt Palace Convention Center and want to bring a similar system to the expo. Any other questions on those?
Madam Chair, if it's.
Go ahead, yes.
I had a question on attendance. So how are we compared to comparable, regions like Denver or Phoenix. You mentioned that attendance is down compared to 2019, but how are we compared to other regions that
so
we compete with?
I can start with that. So we're very proud that we recovered the fastest from what I can see on other convention centers from pre-COVID to post-COVID. So we rebounded the quickest. And I think a lot of that is also that our local attendees are excited to show up to these events. I just showed FanX. I believe there were 14,000 out of state that, which was a lot for that event, but there were 135,000 total attendees, and most of those were local Utahns showing up to our events. So I think we're lucky that in Utah, our attendees are excited to show up to these events and are helping these numbers recover faster.
And we have some comp set data on revenue as well. Sorry, Jim.
No, that's okay. I would just add that we are certainly on par with those other destinations. We certainly rebounded faster. The association business has, I would say, had a slower recovery with respect to drawing that national attendance base out to these different destinations. But it is trending upward and it continues to build. So we feel really, really confident about the health of the industry in that respect. I would say that live events, especially in the meetings industry, are also undergoing their own sort of renovations, if you will. They're really looking at how to program their event activity differently. They're moving a lot from that classroom education format to more of an experiential format. I think as that occurs, you're going to even see more of that Gen Z and millennial engagement as the boomers continue to fall away. So there's a lot of positives.
Yeah,
for sure.
And we can talk too about hotel revenue in our general comp set as well. I went and pulled some numbers just this morning, and we are actually one of the few competitive sets that have actually seen an increase in hotel revenue in our county versus other comp sets. Denver's down 1%, Austin's down 3%, Phoenix is down 1%, and Reno's down 5%. So the fact that we are actually seeing increases and continue to see increases in revenue post-pandemic versus our comp set shows the strength of our visitor economy.
Thank you.
I had a reflection as much as anything. You know how to hurt a person. You know, the boomers built the salt palace.
And
when you talk about it getting old and aging, I take that personally, all right?
I did not say that.
I'm guessing that your presentation will cover this, but I'm wondering about a matrix, or how do we decide which type of convention provides the most economic benefit to our community?
Yeah,
now the costume party, rom-com, or whatever we call it.
Yeah, that's
packs the salt palace, but it's a payoff.
That's a great question.
Okay, take it from there.
So we do have a very extensive, elaborate matrix. We have in the past relied on the Kempsey Gardner Policy Institute, Bieber before that, to provide stats on spend for every different vertical market. And so basically there's an average cost of spend, whether it's a sports group compared to corporate, compared to health and sciences, to across the board. We also make decisions based on time of year, what they're, how many rooms they're bringing in, how much F&B they're spending. And so we take all of those into account and put them into a very robust matrix, and Josh can expand on it even more, to determine what we want to book and the very best piece of business. Because at the end of the day, we only have 52 weeks to sell per year. So it's really kind of a revenue game to figure out what we want to put on the books. Do you have anything to add, Josh?
No,
to
I
that?
think that covered it.
Yeah. Yep. Thank you.
All right. Any other questions from council? All right. I have one other question.
And sorry.
With the whole new rebuild and stuff downtown, tell me we have a fabulous plan that we're thinking of to move forward and make sure we're building and growing and becoming better.
Yeah. So the interesting piece is that Salt Lake really is on fire right now. And I think that it's only going to continue to grow, especially as we get on the global stage leading into the Olympics. To Josh's point, our average booking window is between 3 and 5 years, but right now we have things on the book for as late as 2037. And we have many groups that are now booking 29 and beyond because all the big groups have to book that far. So we really look at ourselves as your 401k plan in terms of city development. There are question marks, certainly, regarding what's going to happen with the Salt Palace. Right now it's business as usual. So we're just putting everything on the books. You will see today that we're creating a reserve fund. Should we have to relocate anyone, create a new date set for them to, if we get to that point and the Salt Palace has to undergo some kind of a renovation. So I would say that the issue is not that we aren't going to have a tremendous amount of business, is that there's just some question marks regarding the facility in the future. Do you guys agree with that?
I certainly agree with that. I think that's well said. I mean, there is some uncertainty, obviously, but there are a lot of people working on different, I would say, solutions or concepts, and there's some great ideas out there for sure.
And we can also, we maybe haven't done this as much in the past. We've kind of talked about in the year for the year, but if you want to see a pacing report for as far out as we have it, we're happy to share that, on a monthly basis, which I think is just really interesting to see the diversity of groups coming in as well.
Yeah, I think that would be cool.
Yeah.
Okay.
Just make a quick comment. I think you guys do a great job with our convention centers. I've been to some of them recently and over the years. I mean, I live in Sandy, so every time I drive by the Mountain America, it's just busy, and the parking is probably something we might need to address at a later date. I don't know, but it's always busy. There's always something going on there, and even downtown, I've been to some of the conferences, and they've just been really cool. Like the way that the Salt Palace can transform to cater to certain groups, it's really cool. And it's interesting because I've actually met some of the people that have attended conferences there. Like after a New Skin conference, there were people at a restaurant and from all over the world.
Yeah.
I was like, wow. And so it was just really cool to connect with people and learn about them and how, teach them about Salt Lake, which was kind of fun. So good job. Appreciate your work.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. All right.
I've got 2 more slides left, and then you'll be done with me.
And then we'll be quick.
Yes.
Step out. Right back.
So at the Salt Palace, we're seeing on the budget year over year from 24 to 25 increased revenues of about 1.5 million, increased expenses to go along with those increased revenues, not as much as those increased revenues. That's about a 5% decrease in subsidy ask from 24 to 25. At Mountain America, we're seeing a similar trend, increased revenues of almost 600K and increased expenses about rounded to 550K. That's about a 7% decrease in subsidy ask year over year. So the commitment from our side is to continue to develop world-class or better than world-class venues the best that we can with decreased subsidy funds. We believe that we can do more with less. And that's it from my side. Thank you.
Excellent. So just the up to move forward. Okay, down. Okay, with that, we'll transition into the Visit Salt Lake specific side. I've got Bart Blaisdell here with me, who is our Chief Financial Officer, and he will be taking on some of the number commentary here. First, I just want to talk about the economic impact and the value of tourism to Salt Lake County. Again, we work closely with the Kimsey Gardner Policy Institute that puts out the county profile every year. And these are our latest statistics, $5.84 billion in visitor spend. We account for 46% of the entire state's tourism industry right here in Salt Lake County, which I think always kind of shocks people. Oftentimes they think of the national parks as kind of leading out, but so much of it happens right in our backyard. We also support 61,000 jobs just in this county alone. And every household pays $1,713 less in taxes because of the ancillary savings from the tourism revenue that's coming in. We always like to link closely back to the Salt Palace and how we work together. 80% of the Salt Palace revenue is from Visit Salt Lake bookings. So this year, that's about $13 million. And so this just goes to highlight that really we're two separate entities working closely together as one party. We don't need to spend too much time on this, but just wanted to give the rundown, mostly just for your records on how Visit Salt Lake is funded. Obviously, you have that transient room tax piece, but from the transient room tax, that's 4.25%. 2% goes to what is called promotions and projects. What we call it is business recruitment and retention, because we're one of the only visitor bureaus in the state that actually books business and has a facility to sell. And then, as you can probably recall, 2.25% goes to projects that are tourism related infrastructure, which is really broad and I think written for that intent. As you probably also recall, we did pass the 2% the 2% CTAA assessment on hotel revenue in 3 districts across the county. So it's not countywide. This is essentially by the hotels for the hotels, and all the revenue is decided by the hotels. And so it has to be, all the money in that fund has to go back to the benefiting parties that are putting in. And we'll share some stats today, but that program in its first year is going incredibly well. And I think the hotels are really happy. So just want to kind of walk through our sales channels and where we're going. So at Visit Salt Lake, we put sales first. And so that is our first and foremost priority, followed by marketing and PR and some of the other pieces. But in 2023, we booked 943,000 rooms. This year, we are actually slated, I would say, to book over 1.1 million. For anyone that's been along for this long ride, I'm looking at Jim and some others and Arlen and Ann. This is a tremendous increase from where we've started. In 2025, we do have a goal of 1.16 million room nights. And so if you want to kind of extrapolate that down to direct delegate spend, so again, coming from Kempsey Gardner, this is just the direct delegate spend. So this is only what Visit Salt Lake books. And that you'll see that in 2023, it was about 442 million. This year, our projected is 528 million, and then next year is 580. So Suzanne, to kind of circle back to your point, I think what we're seeing is while attendance has kind of like baselined a little bit, and I think it will keep on growing maybe more modestly into the future, people are spending more. And that's really what we care about is the quality of the visitor, not necessarily the quantity.
Kaitlin, can I ask a quick question?
Of course.
On the CTAA, did ones that did not choose to participate initially, when they see how great it's going, can they jump in?
So really good question. There is a loophole, or not a loophole, but a way that they could jump back in.
Passage.
Well, it would have to come through board for county council approval, so they could do that, or they could definitely opt in through the official process after 5 years. Okay. So that would be the end of 27. But we have had communities that would like to do that.
Oh, great.
Yeah. Yes. Yep. Let's see. Just a couple of highlights, because I wanted to mention that, sales is obviously the core of what we do, but we need a lot of background and kind of backbone to that process. So obviously we have an amazing marketing department. This year we've reached about 9.2 million households. With about 145,000 ad influence trips. So that means people that have seen our ads have chosen to come to Salt Lake. We also are currently at 2.9 million website visits. And our PR team has generated about 264 news stories. One of the things we're most proud of is just last week, we were announced the 2025 Family Travel Award winner. So Best Destination from Good Housekeeping, which Good Housekeeping seals of approval are still a really big thing. And that was a journalist that we hosted, and she named us that winner. So it's really great. And then just speaking about kind of a then and now perspective before we go into numbers, I always like to show this just a side by side. So where were we, basically 12 months ago versus today? So 12 months ago, our occupancy was 72, today 72.6. Our revenue, RevPAR, stands for revenue per available room. That is at 1.6. To give you an idea, during COVID, I want to say that was like $4. So we've come a long way since COVID-19. And our average daily rate, which is also an indicative of the health of our economy, has gone up a little over $1 in the last year. So really great signs projecting forward. Yeah, down.
Bart, could you turn on your microphone?
There we
Thank
go.
you.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you, Kaitlin, and thank you, County Council, for this opportunity to speak to you guys. We are proposing a 16.3 million budget for Visit Salt Lake through transient room tax, basically to keep our core mission going as the generating the visitor economy. To give you an idea of to where we are at with hotel revenues, as we talked about a little bit earlier, we've got a lot of great growth in hotel revenues over the few years coming out of the pandemic, with 4% currently on pace to keep for this year. Originally this year, we were actually projecting to be down 2%. And so the fact that we're actually growing when a lot of other of our comp sets, as I spoke of earlier, are decreasing just shows the value of our economy and how it continues to grow. And you can see that on this graph, the light blue is actually where we've projected revenues over the past few years, and that dark blue is where we've actually ended up in revenues. And so as we've continued to use our projections and go to STAR, which is one of the hotel industry data reporting people that do this worldwide, they do a projection for us every year. And they've actually, are fairly accurate and historically have been really good for us. And they've actually shown that we are actually expecting a 6.7% increase in revenue next year. Talking to hoteliers and our county finance and industry professionals, they felt like that was a little bit too optimistic. So we pulled that back to another 4% increase for next year. And so what we're projecting is 16.3 million in transient room tax for next year, right alongside where we're budgeting for. You can see that this is our fund balance currently, and all those increased projections and how we've beat our projections is really shown up in our available fund balance, which is that second line below, where we show at the end of 2023, we're about 2.7 million. And then this year we were on a pace to be about 3.1 million. And so we met with our county council, with Darren, who was really great in helping us set up this impact fund. And as we talked about, this is to help us and to be able to use that fund if, we have some downturns or we have needs that are from adjustments or renovations that happen at the Salt Palace, to be able to use those funds to be able to maintain and proceed forward as we see fit here and as the county sees fit. It also could help us if we don't see those downturns from this to actually use these funds in the future to major events like the Olympics coming up. So we've got Kaitlin just recently was in the most recent Summer Olympics there and had a lot of great ideas and took a lot of great ideas that Paris was doing, and we want to be able to implement them, but those implementations come with cost. And so to be able to sort of set that money aside and be able to have it there as an option, I think will be beneficial to us and beneficial to the county.
So I just want to make sure that it's really clear, because I wanted to make sure for our board, as well as we were going through this review process, that it didn't look like we are decreasing our budget by $2 million. We're just creating a $2 million set aside, because going back to some of your questions about the future, it's just unknown. And we might have to even redeploy groups or figure out ways to incentivize them to take a new set of dates if we go through a Salt Palace renovation. So this is really that mitigation fund. / special opportunities.
Exactly. Yeah, thank you. And you can see even with that reduction, we've got a very good, strong fund balance that's available to us at the end of the year, looking close to be 1.2 million. And then if we were able to proceed forward with the budget we're proposing, still having around $1 million in that fund balance available to us to be able to pull from if there's any special incentives or anything that comes up that may be needed. Here you can see the historical spend that we've sort of had for our sales and marketing budget. You can see in 2024, we had that 50% increase that was largely due to the CTAA program. And so you can see that in 2025, we are coming back down to a 6% growth in our funds. We want to be able to use those fund balances strategically. And right now, with the growth that's going on in the tourism industry, this is going to be a good opportunity to take these funds and continue on that path and show that growth that we've seen while other people have more leveled off. And with that, now I'll transition to our CTAA budget proposal. We are currently projecting that we will have a $8.3 million as a budget for Visit Salt Lake in the CTAA program. The management plan for the CTAA requires that the spend for this program goes into these 4 different buckets, with 30% being regional and sales incentives, with 50% being development. That is our marketing end, and that's also our major events, things that we put on as a group to be able to help entice people to come to Salt Lake. And then we have a 10% fund that we put money aside for major events, things that we can be able to use to further our mission, and then 10% for administrative costs. Here is our fund balance that you can see. You can also see the opening balance of that is 1.4 million. The reason that it's an opening balance, even though we started in 2024, is because we did start collecting in October of 2023. And to make sure that we had the funds available for us, we didn't start pulling from those funds until 2024. And so we did start with that 1.4 million. And it just gives us a good baseline, something in the fund, so that we always know that we're being judicious with the money that we're spending and be able to pull it if we need to. So with that budget, if we are able to get the 4% increase in revenue that we are projecting, both TRT and CTA wise, we would still have around 700,000 in that fund going into the end of 2025. And now I'm going to turn it back over to Kaitlin just to sort of give you some highlights of the CTA year 1 and what we were able to do with the funding.
Yeah, and this has been really exciting, and we're creating a full report on everything that we've been able to fund, because I think you'll find it really interesting. But our historical room night growth has been about 6%. This year is 19%. So that is a direct reflection of the things that we've been able to procure and court, and in some cases incentivize to come to Salt Lake. We've also been able to do more marquee events. And so the premise behind these is that we are doing events based on need periods in the community, and so that we can make sure that we're kind of, if you build it, they will come type situation. So there's historic kind of periods that are just less busy. So we're trying to build in events to make sure that we can keep that robust nature. And so last year we started our winter roundup. Dee's very familiar with this. She was able to come, and it's our ski joring event. So we're going to build on that. This year we're partnering with Days of 47. So they're super excited. It's almost like a winter Days of 47. And so we're working directly with Tommy Jo Lucia, who's the executive director over there. We're also going to be playing off of the 80th annual Nutcracker. So if you didn't know, the Ballet West Nutcracker, or the first Americanized Nutcracker, happened right here in Salt Lake. And it's the 80th year. And so we're really excited. So you'll start seeing activations downtown. And we're also rolling out kind of a Nutcracker scavenger hunt, if you will. And then we just got back from New York City doing a media activation, because that's one of our primary markets, especially for ski. And that was kind of based around the Olympic storytelling and this idea that so many Olympic champions train here, and they live here, and they play here. And one anecdote, I didn't know if you know this, but 1/3 of Team USA in 2022 at the Beijing Olympics had ties to Utah. 1/3, which is crazy. And so we can really own that as being a global champion. We can't use the term Olympic yet, a global champion destination. In addition, we hosted 18 different media, what we call familiarization tours, and over 5,000 international tours. So basically internationally, we've increased our presence about 9% or our bookings. I will also just mention one that's not on this slide that I think is really meaningful and creative. One of the comments during the approval of CTAA was, can you build infrastructure? And the answer is yes. It just depends on if the hotels can see a value in voting for that. And we just passed an incentive. We needed to book a major softball tournament at Centennial Park in West Valley City. And they couldn't accommodate it because they needed certain upgrades to their venue. So essentially, we worked with West Valley City and the softball tournament organizer to say, hey, what if we pay essentially $50,000, $60,000 for these upgrades at Centennial Park, and tournament organizer, then you commit to coming here. And so it's a win-win for everyone. West Valley City gets their upgrades. The hotels are super happy because it's out of state business, and we get this long-term contract. So I think you're going to start seeing more of those really strategic solutions that we're excited about. Next slide, please.
Can you make sure to advertise that to all the other softball folks?
Yeah.
To West Valley.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes. And I mean, this is so exciting because there's so many opportunities for us that we can influence if people know that the tool exists. So that concludes our portion of the presentation. Erin has one more slide, but are there any questions for us?
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you all. I just wanted to remind everyone that these are individual contributions to individual organizations and are not affiliated with either the Salt Palace, Mountain America, or the Visit Salt Lake budget. But these were presented as part of Mayor Wilson's budget, and we choose to present them today because we're presenting the majority of TRT use for the 2025 budget. So those 4 contributions that were included in the mayor's budget are for Sundance, for the Utah Sports Commission, for the Utah Restaurant Association, and the Salt Lake Restaurant Association in the Salt Lake area. These have been historical contributions that we have provided out of this fund. They did fill out applications, and so I can tell you that the Sundance contribution is intended to support events that happen here in Salt Lake County as it relates to the event. The Sports Commission contribution is intended to bring and host events in Salt Lake County that have favorable economic impact. They're not tied to any specific event, but more general funds meant to help procure and bring different events to Salt Lake County. The Utah Restaurant Association contribution is used for their restaurant annual advertising campaign that they do called Eat Out Often. This is something that they've done historically for a number of years, and we've contributed to those efforts. And then the last one is for the Salt Lake Area Restaurant Association, which is intended to fund a podcast where they're highlighting local private businesses and restaurants that are in the community and sharing that with the broader community to encourage fostering and developing our independent owners of restaurants in Salt Lake County.
Thank you. And I don't know if you're running, but I would like to ask Dave to add the Sundance contribution to the list. I'd like to dig into that a little bit more, especially if maybe someone here could give me an update on if they've decided they're leaving the state or when that timeline is.
Yeah, so
I'd like it added to the list.
I can give you a little update. We are in active RFP. We've been shortlisted to three communities. The pitch is essentially about 70-30% split. So 70% in Salt Lake, 30% in Park City, which is a shift and helps them align with what their goals are, which are making it a more affordable festival for a broader audience. Shortlisted also are Boulder and Cleveland. We are hosting them for an additional site inspection later this month to really look at the venue footprint, and they should make a decision, they say, shortly thereafter the festival in January 25.
Madam Chair, I think we have contributions teed up for next week, and we can certainly add all of these to that list if that's the council's preference.
My only ask is the Sundance one at this point, but I don't know what other folks do.
Yeah, I have one actually I would like to add to that, and that's the last one, the Salt Lake Area Restaurant Association, if we can add that to the list as well. And I don't know if there's any others. I mean, we can throw them all in there, but.
Well, if those are the only two that you're interested in, these are TRT-based contributions, I leave it to the council to include the motion.
Someone online wanting to speak? Okay, no.
I think unless other people feel differently, let's just leave the two that Dee and I have identified as on the list, unless other people feel strongly.
So, Madam Chair, then I'm looking for a motion in general.
I move that we adopt the budget as proposed by the mayor with the 2 items that we've identified to be added to the list.
Second. Oh, sorry. I forget I'm chairing, so anyway.
I'll second.
Okay, thank you. And can I get a roll call vote on that? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? All right, thank you.
Thank you all so much.
Thank you very much.
Okay, so let's see.
You should have been ahead.
Next, is it Catherine? Are you up now? Yeah, thank you.
So I'm going to turn the time over to Catherine and her team. And we're going to talk about the recreation.
Contributions? Okay, so Unified Fire. Okay.
Thanks, Dave. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you.
I saw that.
Yes. This, in fact, is the Canyon contribution item. We're actually calling it the recreation area contribution now. We changed the name to have it correspond with the policy and the resolution that you all passed previously, which refers to the area now as the recreation area. So that's the official title. You're going to hear us go back and forth between saying Canyon contribution, rec contribution. It's just hard to shift your brain after you've been talking about it with a certain name. But in any event, that's what this is. Just want to let you know I have Saskia DeVries with me here today. There was a group of us who worked on analyzing the requests that came from UFA for this contribution per the new policy 7037. It's myself and Saskia and Lisa Hartman and Jared, Steffi as well. There was a bunch of data crunching that had to be done, data sourcing, data analyzing. Saskia led that effort, so I felt like it was a good idea to have her up here in case you all wanted to dive into that level of detail. I will have to ask a friend, which will be Saskia. Okay, so moving on, Lauren is, oh, thank you. This is the clicker, okay. Yay, no, maybe? Down. Do I need to point it? Oh, hold on. Go up one. Be smarter than the clicker. Okay, there we go. Do I have to, yeah, okay, thank you. All right. And by the way, I just want to check to make sure, Mayor Wilson, did you have anything you wanted to say at the get-go, or would you want to reserve some time at the end?
No, I mean, I guess so. I mentioned this in the last meeting that we're really looking for, first of all, analysis of spend and reviewing contracts, and also looking at ultimately seeking the goal of fairness for all of our municipalities, those in our districts and out of our districts. And things have shifted quite a bit since the creation of townships, and now with townships, with legislation moving our townships to full city status. So that's yet another contributing element. And just as we spent literally more time than I can recall on a policy matter addressing the breakup of the UPD, the establishment again of the sheriff's office within our county operations, we're doing the same for other entities. And then I would refer you to policy 7037 passed by the council. And it's asked that the mayor makes a recommendation, which is why now, plus the outcome of the decision here by the council, based on my recommendation, will help the other participants of the district as they go into their budgets on a July year through the UPD or the UFA process rather on their July year. So those are the reasons for this. And if I've missed anything, Catherine, I'll turn it back to you. And also, lastly, I want to thank, there's been a lot of work by staff, Saskia, Catherine, and other partners, Darren, to get us the information that we have today. We want all council members, parties, the chief, Tony, to tell us if we have an error in our calculations. because this is a complex matter. So I don't want anyone to, fear that we are not flexible as it relates to input on this conversation. So with that, thanks to all, and I'll turn it back to Catherine.
Okay, thanks, Mayor. And the mayor just mentioned Chief and Tony, who are here with us today. Chief Burchett of the UFA, Tony Hill, who is the CFO of the UFA. They will be coming up here after we give our presentation to share some of their thoughts as well. And I want to thank them for all the work that they've been doing with us to get us to the point where we are today. Okay, so the mayor really pretty much just covered the first slide here about just sort of setting the stage and framing it in this larger context of really considering not just this service district budget, but actually other service district budgets as well, and how those relate to the unincorporated Salt Lake County. So today we're going to do a number of different things. First, we're going to go over the policy 7037, because this is really the first time we've really assessed the rec contribution per the context of that policy. We're going to be looking at the rec area contribution request of how it impacts the general fund. We actually have some updated calculation for the rec area revenue that is different from what we had originally received from UFA. We'll talk about that. Again, we want to be looking at a holistic picture of the revenue and expenditures, questions of parity among all municipalities, as Mayor mentioned, and then last, the mayor's recommendation, and then we actually have a suggestion for next steps. Okay, so there we go. Let's just go over policy 7037 to just kind of remind everybody of the history here. So in October of 2023, that's when this policy was passed. And the way it works now is that any outside party that wants to ask for money as a rec area contribution comes to the county, submits a proposal. The mayor's office then conducts a review of that funding request and submits a recommendation to the council as part of the county's budget process. That's why this came to you as part of the budget process we're going through right now, and was first announced at the mayor's introduction of her budget. Just to remind everybody, I know everyone knows this, but the policy clearly states that this is not intended to be an entitlement for this rec contribution. The policy wasn't entitled to be an entitlement. Every year, the county council gets to decide whether or not they're going to agree to a rec contribution and the amount. There are then various steps that took place over the last year or so, including adopting a new rec area boundary that took place in April of this year. That was a really important step. If you all remember, what happened there is that the rec area, prior rec area, used to include a municipality. It was Brighton. In this update to that, it excluded Brighton, and it limited the rec area to just unincorporated areas. That was an important step in this process because it resolved an issue about one municipality being specifically preferred over another municipality, even if they were sort of similarly situated. Brighton and Alta is the best example for that. So that took a lot of work, and it was a really great result. It didn't necessarily solve all of the issues related to this larger question, but it certainly got us closer to what I'll call eventual resolution. So now that leads us to this process now that we're going through to decide what we're doing about the 2025 county calendar year budget vis-a-vis this request. Okay, so the next item, sorry, the typing is a little small there. This shows you on the right side, this is pulled, this verbatim, copied and pasted from UFA's requests that they came in at the end of July and what they asked for. And what they asked for, you can see the amount is that $3,129,150. That's what that is. On the left, we've just, for orientation purposes, we've included a map that shows all of the unincorporated area, the rec area, and the 6 stations that are served that serve the rec area. You can see there's one on the west side, and then there's 5 on the east side. Again, that's just pictorial so that y'all can kind of get the lay of the land. The issue here is that you can see if you take the total revenue that UFA has indicated, which is at 749,517, and you apply the total expenditures for that area, which is $3.8 million, you come up with this, what we call gap, delta, of $3.1 million. That was the number that UFA brought to us, and that's why they asked us for a contribution in that amount. One thing that I just want to note, because these numbers get kind of fuzzy, and here's why. The fiscal year 2024 request was higher than that $3,129,150 number. UFA came in with a lower request from a prior year. So it may look like the mayor is reducing the request by a certain amount, and she's not, because there was $46,000 that was already taken off of the amount that was being requested. You might be able to see that more clearly in some additional slides, but just hold that thought for a minute. Okay. Hello, other Madam Chair.
Yeah, I apologize.
No worries, we'll shift. Okay, this next slide, I don't want to hover too long on this. This is really kind of getting in the weeds and detail, but this was just an attempt to sort of break down that expenditure slide more precisely. Most importantly, the takeaways from this is you can see that the lion's share of the expenditures from that slide prior, we're really talking about operating costs for the fire stations. There's a little bit additional for the canyon wildfire mitigation and admin, but what we're really talking about are our calls from fire stations and operating costs. And then just if you are curious, in digging deep, you can see at the bottom on the right, that's just a breakdown from a percentage perspective, the percentage of the calls that are actually going to the rec areas from those various stations. And you can see Little Cottonwood Canyon is the one that predominantly services, that station 113 predominantly services Little Cottonwood and the others less so. Okay. Next slide. Okay, so now this is getting to when I said that there's a difference in opinion right now with respect to the total amount of revenue that's being generated by the rec area. And remember, the rec area is just the area that's been delineated by the county, right? And UFA's number is right around 749. Ours is a little bit higher. It's the 9,007. The differential is about $157,000. We are still working with Tony and team to reconcile that difference. I suspect we will get there within the next few days, if not the next week or so. So I want to put a pin in it for a minute and not get too hung up on math. That's what I'm going to call it, because we really need to be focused on policy issues today. But just so you know, we estimate the revenue number coming from the rec area to be $907,000. And you can see the way that we got to that in the slide. The important point of this is if we're correct and the number is closer to 900,000, that means that gap in the rec area is actually smaller, right? Yeah, smaller. I got that right. Meaning, and remember, the gap is what UFA essentially used as a justification for the rec area contribution. So the gap is in fact smaller. You would think that the ask would be reduced in a corresponding amount. TBD about exactly what that looks like, but that's the concept. The next slide actually shows you that number that I just mentioned, the 157. And then the rest of the slide just explains what I just explained, which is if you adopt the 907 as the accurate number, the revised gap actually comes down to 2.9 instead of instead of the number from before, from a prior slide. Okay, and then, the last little asterisk is, as we're revising these revenue numbers, we also, I think, have to also consider whether or not the expenses should be adjusted if the revenue numbers are being adjusted. We don't see a reason why that necessarily would be the case, but we wanted to asterisk just in case to give UFA the opportunity to weigh in on that. Okay, now we're getting to kind of the meat of the conversation. What this slide is intending to do is to look at unincorporated Salt Lake County revenue holistically. So not just unincorporated revenue in the rec area, but also think about unincorporated revenue outside of the rec area. And here's why that matters. If you look on the left side of the graph, you'll see the green box, the little green box. That is unincorporated revenue compared to compared to the expenses in the rec area, just in the rec area. And you'll see that's where you have the $3 million gap. But if you look at all unincorporated revenue, excluding the rec area, you'll see that there's an additional $8 million there. Now, right now, we don't know exactly what the amount of expenses that are attributable to that non-rec unincorporated area. Tony and others are working to pull that together. We're guessing that maybe it's around $3 million. We know that there's $1 million contract to Sandy that's in there. And again, we're kind of guessing it's $3 million. But in any event, if it's more than $3 million, it can't be more than, let's call it $4 million or something like that. And so there's still, you can see there's what we're calling this surplus between unincorporated revenue, non-rec, and expenses attributable to that same area. Okay. The other thing I want to point out is if you compare the amount of revenue coming from the rec area, which is the 907, that's about 10% of all of the unincorporated revenue that goes to UFSA. Just think about that as a marker. Okay. So here's the holistic view that I was talking about. Again, the left side just shows the rec area, the purple. It shows the rec area the rec expenditures. The purple shows the rec area expenditures. And again, the upper box with the dashes is the number that we're still pulling together for the non-rec area expenditures. The right side, what that is showing you is what I'm going to call the stack of funding that comes from both unincorporated and general fund. And here's how it's broken down. You have $907,000 coming from unincorporated within the rec area. On top of that, you have another roughly $8 million coming from non-rec area unincorporated. And that's broken down by roughly $2 million, $1.9 million of not centrally assessed revenue versus the centrally assessed revenue, which is roughly 6.1 or 6.2. On top of that, you've got another, let's call it 2.8 of the general fund coming in for the rec contribution. So in total, that amounts to roughly $12 million. If you're just looking at it from how much is Salt Lake County, both unincorporated Salt Lake County through the UFSA and the general fund through the rec contribution contributing, it's $12 million. That little line at the top, the red line at the top, that's just the amount of what we're proposing, what the mayor is proposing for a reduction from the UFA request, which is $300,000. So you can see that in the context of the stack. Okay.
Oh, hold on. Question.
Yes, ma'am.
I just want to make sure I'm understanding this
Yes,
correctly.
please.
So the centrally assessed $6 million is going to UFSA.
Correct.
Only. Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And just so you know, that's primarily Rio Tinto Kennecott funding. Not solely, because centrally assessed is broader, right, than just Rio Tinto. It's centrally assessed is mining claims or mining utilities, railroads, airports.
And we also have
that's
some other
all-
businesses that fall in that too.
Yeah.
And
Yes,
that's
ma'am.
all going to UFSA.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. So here is the question of parity that the mayor teed up for us. And we tried to phrase this in very kind of precise policy questions because this is really complicated stuff. And we've tried to kind of hone in on exactly what we're talking about. Here's what it is. If you look at Salt Lake County unincorporated holistically, you're going to see that UFSA receives roughly $9 million, right? That was the $6 million plus for centrally assessed, plus another roughly 2 million for non-centrally assessed. Those are non-rec areas, plus another 900,000, roughly $1 million of rec area revenue. Okay. So let's just think about that. That's $9 million, right? UFA also receives the $3 million from the general fund. That's how we got to the 12 million stack, right? Here's the question. If there's a gap of roughly $3 million in the rec area, and again, the reason there's a gap in the rec area is because if you look at the revenue coming into the rec area and compared to the expenses, there's a gap because there's less money coming in from unincorporated than it costs to actually provide services to that area. So there's a gap. So if there's that gap, the question is, why is that gap not first being filled by the remaining unincorporated revenue from all non-rec areas, both centrally assessed and non-centrally assessed, as opposed to the general fund? Now, one of the answers to that is because that unincorporated revenue is going to Slavisa, right? And Slavisa then, UFSA. UFSA, and then UFSA turns that over to UFA. So that's one reason, right? It's part of a service district. But if you step back for a minute and just ask the question, is that the right thing to be doing, right? Is that the right place to be filling the gap? That is the question we're presenting to you all. Now, there is a complicated, I'll call it a complicated factor in that in the past, my understanding is that UFA has seen the centrally assessed property in the non-rec area as funding primarily 2 fire stations, Magda 102 and Copperton 115. And that's because those fire stations do in fact service Rio Tinto, Kennecott. Okay, so that's a complicating factor just to throw into this puzzle. All right. The policy question there is, does that make sense? You know, should the Salt Lake County revenue be subsidizing essentially those 2 stations? Understanding that there are particular unique circumstances as to why that might be the case or why that should continue to be the case. But we're just presenting it as a policy question, bringing the facts to you and allowing you all to deliberate and consider. Okay, so that brings me to the actual mayor's budget recommendation, because again, this is a little tricky, so let me walk through the numbers. The mayor has recommended 2.8 as the contribution. That is a net reduction of $359,479 from the 2023 rec area contribution. So on our budget, it'll look like $359 less than the prior year. Okay. But the first thing you have to know is that $46,000 of that is already money that UFA didn't ask for. So I don't think we can really consider that as a cut because they didn't ask for it, even though it's a reduction from the prior year, if that makes sense. So what the reduction really is 10% of what they asked for. And that 10% amounts to $312,915. Now, you may have seen a difference. There's been references to 10% versus 20%, another confusing point. The reason it was structured as 20%, it was the need, we needed to do it for purposes of our Sherpa budget, which is originally the mayor had proposed that it would be 20% reduction, but that it wouldn't be imposed until the second half of 2025. That was intended to allow the UFA time to adjust to the reduction in the latter half of the year. Plus, their budget year is different than ours. It goes from July to June, as opposed to ours is a calendar year. So that was why we recommended that sort of like deferral of the implementation of the reduction, which then takes it to 10%, not 20%. Now, if this council were to decide to, in 2026 budget year, to keep it, what would be showing up in Sherpa would be 20%. So for purposes of 2025, though, think of it as a 10% reduction from what UFA asked for. Okay, another complicating piece, which is that if we go back to that discrepancy between what we think the revenue for the rec area is versus what UFA had originally proposed, depending on how that gets resolved, if it turns out that the county's number is accurate, then it's really possible that that 10% number shrinks down to 5% because the ask might be reduced. Okay. I know that's a lot of assumptions and numbers, but that's what that is. On the right side, you can see what I just talked about. The 2024 contribution is at 3.175. The amount requested from UFA is a 3.129. The mayor's recommendation is 2.6, the net reduction being 359. It's just another way of looking at the two bullets on the right side. And then lastly, just so everybody has a visual on it, the payment schedule. You'll see the first half of 2025. There's essentially no change. It's it's 50% of what UFA asked for. The second half is when you see the 10% reduction factored in. Okay, so that's the budget recommendation, and I'll just sum up by making a few observations. The first is, I was actually asked earlier today at the UFA board meeting, where did that 10%/20% number come up with? What's the methodology? What's the science behind it? And the answer is there wasn't really a lot of science behind it. It was intended to be a recognition that there's an issue that this council should consider. But it was intended to not be something that would be too onerous on UFA or draconian, I'll call it, right? We consider it to be a relatively modest reduction. Again, it's 10%, could drop to 5%. But the reason that we're recommending it, the mayor's recommending it, is that we really see this as a step in what is going to be a longer process of addressing holistically this question about parity as it relates to unincorporated revenue benefiting certain municipalities over the others. We had this conversation in the Slovisa UPD sheriff scenario. We resolved it to a certain extent, not fully. It's showing up here. It might show up in another service district example, municipal service district, different type of service district, all these are different variations of structures, but you've still got the same question about the use of unincorporated revenue. That is a highly, highly, highly complex issue. It's not going to be resolved in this budget session. I suggest it could take years, 3 to 5 years is why we threw up that time frame up there, to really come to a solid solution moving forward that makes sense for all the various stakeholders. And the next step that we're recommending is to bring in a outside third-party impartial facilitator to help the various stakeholders finally come to a resolution on this really complex issue. We had considered doing that in the Slovisa UPD sheriff scenario. We ran out of time. We didn't do it. I think a number of us who were engaged in that process, internally and external partners, think we should have brought a facilitator in. That would have helped us tremendously. We didn't have time. We ran out of time because there was a statutory deadline that we were trying to meet, right? We have time in this case, and we think we should commit that time and commit our efforts and our work to be able to collaboratively try to come up with a long-term solution to this complex issue. So regardless of what you all decide to do with respect to the amount of the contribution, I would really ask you to endorse this idea of bringing in a facilitator to help us move forward.
Is that included in the budget?
It's not. We'll figure that out. Okay, I think that's all I had. Mayor, did you have anything you wanted to wrap with?
I don't think so. I would just continue to emphasize the idea of bringing in a facilitator so we can make sure that all of the data, both provided from the district, from UFA, and from our side, is accepted and accurate, and that we can recognize that the county has shifted over the past several decades in terms of its move towards a regional provider. I appreciate that the letter from the UFA acknowledged that we are facing an incredibly tight budget in our general fund. And I would just note that if we are to be the regional provider of services that are necessary in our county, especially around public safety, we need to be able to fund them. So this is just a further recognition of our changing role and our efforts to sort of move towards greater assessment and understanding of the actual support to our district partners. So with that, I'd be interested to hear from others involved and from the council as to your interest and next steps.
Can I just ask a follow-up related to the facilitator recommendation?
Yeah.
So presumably you mean a third-party external partner.
Yes.
And is that because we feel that it needs to be neutral and that
Yes.
even though we have plenty of professionals both
Yes.
at UFSA and the county,
Yes.
we just have a disagreement on the facts?
Yes, and I would say it's recognition of just how complex the issue is. And I think bringing in a facilitator to help us sort of, I'll call it chunk out the various different issues. It's just, that's what facilitators do. I mean, think of it as almost sort of like a mediator type. I don't want to use the word mediator because that suggests, litigation, and we're nowhere near that.
Well, I don't
Never
know
will be, but
too in the weeds, but is that something we would go out to RFP for, or is that a service we could have provided through our subscription to the Ken Gardner Policy Institute?
I don't think Kim Gardner would necessarily. I mean, I'm thinking more, and again, this is an idea, so we haven't figured out the details. I'm thinking more of like a professional mediator type. There are retired judges who do this kind of work all the time, who try to resolve conflicts, right? It's like a conflict resolution type person. So I'm not sure Kim Gardner would fill that role, but if people are in support of it, we will figure out what's the appropriate type of professional to come in. And then, yes, we would, I presume, do an RFP, of course.
Yeah. About that.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Do you want to go first, Amy?
I think it's the mayor.
It was
the mayor.
me.
Go ahead,
Okay.
Jenny.
Yeah, I just wanted to say it depends on whether or not we can get an agreement of sort of the financial assessment, right? If the parties are agreeing that we don't need to do a deep dive on expenditures and revenue, and the parties agree on that front, then we might be looking more at a retired judge or, that level of facilitator. I would say that accounting firms have this type of consulting. So it could be we bring on like a more of a business oriented to provide a validation of the revenue and make sure everybody comes to agreement on that. And then that would, I think, put it back on the policymakers. Ultimately, I feel it's my role. Catherine is my representative on the UPD. We are not represented, my office, on the district, UFSA. So we want to make sure that the elected officials and others representing the county are also involved in this discussion, just as we saw during the UPD split matter. And so I just think there's a lot of parties. I don't want to put my office, have us lean in too far, frankly. So I think that's where a group of people that have expertise, subject expertise in this, could be brought to the table through facilitation. I don't think this is a break the bank level of investment for the county, but I think it's one that pays off given the multiple parties, both at the county, within the district, and at the UPD that are, the UFA that are represented. And I do think this same exercise that we've done a lot of work on the UPD side is pertinent to that, and the MSD as well.
Having been involved in a court case and used whatever term you want to use, it is very expensive and very time consuming. Since there are legal issues involved in this and policy issues as well, is there a possibility that someone in the DA's office could serve in that role?
There is. I will let the DA answer that. And we explored that idea, quite frankly, in the Slovisa UPD sheriff situation. Part of the issue is, I think, when you're talking about outside municipalities and other stakeholders, they might see the DA as representing the county. And so the idea of
Which we are.
Which they are. Yeah, they don't, it's not optics, it's in fact, right? And so I think that's the hiccup with that idea. And this idea of a facilitator didn't necessarily come from Salt Lake County. There were other, I'll call it legal representatives and other representatives of other stakeholders who were saying this of maybe we need to be bringing in a facilitator to help move this process along. So, and again, TBD as to how it works out. To the mayor's point, if it's not something, if it's going to break the bank, I mean, then we have to seriously reassess, right? But if it's something that can be done in a relatively nimble, cost-effective way, we should explore it with other stakeholders at the table to think about how it should be done.
And just be aware, I mean, there's implications on this to everything that we're doing with any of the service districts, because what we choose to do is essentially assessed in one, needs to be consistent among those and how we look at that. Services are not the same, how we administer those services aren't the same, but the parameters and some of the policy can be set up around that specifically so that we're consistent with how we administer it. And I think that is something that we need to discuss as a council and make sure we understand what kind of policy we want to set for that. So I know it's a conversation we've been having on many of our boards. So anyway.
Okay. Are there any other questions? Because if not, I'm just going to mention one more thing before we depart. Dave Del Quadro is probably asking, what is it that we've just asked you all to do today, right? And here's what it is. Obviously, we still have this discrepancy between some figures, right, with UFA, and we need to resolve those, and I think we will. Today, if you're looking to do something, it's really that I would focus more on this kind of policy question of should the rec area contribution as requested by UFA be reduced by a certain amount? And we will figure out the discrepancy issue and how that all plays out. And then also just this question of endorsing this idea of bringing a facilitator, understanding we're not asking for a budget for that today, but just telling us whether or not that you think that's a good idea that we could go out and start to explore. So those, I think, are the questions for today. And we can come back next Tuesday, hopefully with a resolution on the discrepancy number.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
That makes sense.
Okay. All right. Thank you, everyone. And now I'll turn it over to you.
Yeah. Okay. And our next item is Unified Fire. So Chief Dominic Burchett, our Unified Fire Authority, and Burchett, what did I say? Oh, sorry, Burchett. I knew that. I just don't know why it came out that way. Okay. Anyway.
I'll answer to both.
Yes, sorry. And if you'll introduce who is with you, that would
Yep,
be
I have
fabulous.
CFO Hill here. He's the CFO for Unified Fire Authority and
And if you want to pull that close to you.
Unified Fire Service Authority area. So thanks for your time and thank you, first of all, for supporting the recreation area funding for a number of years, especially over the last number of years when it's been put under scrutiny. This body has shown support by funding the full request for a number of years now, clearly recognizing the regional value of those recreation areas. My goal for today is just to highlight the importance of this funding as it allows, in part, the UFA to provide a critical service to the public safety in those recreation areas. Last budget cycle, has been mentioned, our team spent a lot of time and a lot of energy working collaboratively with the council, the mayor's staff, and the stakeholders to find a fair and responsible solution to what was a complicated issue. We found a solution, and we didn't even get a chance to see that solution play out or for a single budget year. The first year that we presented, according to the new policy, there was a proposed cut. And I believe now that that argument has changed from what it was to now centrally assessed. The argument now feels rushed to me and exactly opposite of what we tried to do last year in a collaborative way. We haven't been involved in the opportunity to vet the numbers and to look at the data until just Friday. So as has been mentioned by Catherine, our numbers that we presented back in July, they're not saying they're accurate. And we got those numbers from the county assessor's office, presented them back in July, and are just now hearing that they don't think that they're accurate. So I think that there's some opportunity there. to pause and give us time to verify the numbers and make sure that what we're presenting is accurate and what they're presenting is accurate as well. In fact, yesterday, Tony was speaking with Saskia, and there's a $2 billion discrepancy between what the county is showing with what the state is showing. So there's some numbers there that need to be verified. And I think that point has been made. I don't want this funding to be cut without, based on a difference of an accounting position or an analysis of the data. So as we mentioned, that argument has changed to shifting now to the centrally assessed and the revenue generated therein because of what happened with UPD and the Sheriff's Office. And you mentioned the consistency, but I want to urge you to recognize the difference in those organizations. We have different cost structures, and we have different governing bodies. We have to have fire stations in those locations to provide the service, where UPD doesn't. They can drive around in a patrol car. So the expenses are much different. And then another point to note is that we actually provide fire and EMS to Kennecott, to the property. We respond on the north gate and the south gate. Unlike many service districts that receive revenue from Kennecott, they don't provide any service to Kennecott. The money, as has been mentioned again from Kennecott, has long been used to provide service to that property. And understanding, though, that it does help fund portions of the Magna and Copperton stations and other parts of UFSA. But what the mayor's proposal appears to be suggesting is moving the money from the west side over to the east side. And that's assuming that there's a surplus, which there is not a surplus of money. That's, to me, is ignoring the need to provide that service to Kennecott and to Magna. And in that, again, just highlighting the difference in UPD, that we need to staff those fire stations 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. And moving that money, has been suggested, will impact that service on those west sides. The proposed cut to the funding, it was defined in the memo to me as a modest reduction to the funding. And it's clear that it's not, are we talking about 10% or 20%? I have to assume it's 20% because we're on different budget cycles. And so to me, that's $670,000 roughly. And that is not a modest amount to my service. That's about what it takes to staff an ambulance for the year. So not a modest cut. This, again, is a reduction on an amount that has not changed since 2011, despite the fact that our services continue to increase year over year. On average, we see a 3 to 5% member fee increase, and that 3.1 has been the same amount since 2011. So an additional arbitrary, I'll call it 20% cut, is not an insignificant amount for UFA. And I think that it would right-size that funding in the wrong direction. And it will absolutely have impacts to the level of service that we can provide out there. So in closing, I feel that we've lost sight of the fact that the recreation areas are a regional benefit and provide regional value to the residents countywide. And you just heard from Visit Salt Lake, $6 billion in tourism revenue is coming in. The areas that we serve up there don't generate enough revenue to pay for the level of service that our residents and visitors now expect. So is it equitable that the costs to provide these services that are benefiting the entire county are only paid for by UFA members or by countywide residents? To me, this budget cut appears, and I think it's been mentioned, to maybe force your hands into a policy decision. And I would urge you to consider a policy decision first and then make the necessary cuts if that's what you choose to do. But thank you again for your continued support and keeping these unique areas, allowing us to keep these unique areas safe and well protected for our visitors and residents.
Okay. Any questions from council? Well, it sounds like we've got some work to do on some numbers, correct?
I believe so, yes.
Okay.
Yep.
So I'm guessing that it'll be in our best interest to have them bring some numbers back to us so we know kind of what they're looking at numbers wise, and we can get that adjusted and figured out so that we're all working on the same numbers and we're all on the same page. I think that would be helpful. So let's go
Madam
ahead.
Chair, just to make clear though, that the revenue number was, there was a difference of opinion as to a source. The expenditures number, as I understand it, was not questioned by the mayor's staff at the moment. So what I'm trying to say is that it looks to me that what you're saying is that the number that seems to be, or needs to be, a consensus needs to be arrived at is on the revenue side. And the question that I have in terms of where we're going is, I think this is a complicated issue. I would hope that the revenue number could be ironed out in a week, but regardless of that, the questions raised by Catherine include, are you comfortable with a facilitator, as well as what are you going to do about the proposed budget? So, I mean, we certainly can delay any decision until next week, but I mean, let's be clear that we need to come up with a tentative budget on Tuesday of next week.
Well, I can tell the council kind of where I'm sitting right now. I work on several special district boards, but one specifically that deals with a similar scenario, different services, of course, in which we have the centrally assessed, and we work very hard on making all that work together for everybody that's in that particular district. And when it comes right down to it, there is always a discussion on, all right, how is that money being used and how are we balancing that, right? And you see that happen in different ways. When we're looking at making sure that we are, I think what has happened in those discussions when we've looked at UPD and SLVISA, when we looked at UFSA and UPD and UFA, right? And then we look at the because we're dealing with road funds instead, with and sales tax when it comes to the municipal services district. We have the same scenario in all of those in which the county brings in a bulk amount and it's spread among those members, and that's how we pay our bill. And that has been an ongoing thing with the service district. That's why you're in a service district. But then that service district, in this case for both UFSA and for SLVISA, is a member of another service district in which they pay a portion of a bill that way. I remember coming on this board saying, why are we paying twice for UFA? Because I didn't understand it. We're a member of this, we should be paying outside of UFSA. If we have to pay more, it should be through UFSA, because that is who we are a member with. There shouldn't be a separate payment coming out, because logically, that is who we are members through. So if we are going to be paying, they should be billing us through that, and we would pay into UFSA, and then our bill would come through that, because we're a member of UFSA just like everyone else. Now, recognizing it's a little bit more complicated than that, but that was the simple concept of, well, I'm a member of this. That's why we're a member of this. We're sharing those funds, and that's what we pay into this. So we looked at a way of policy for the council of how do we create and use these recreation district areas to make sure that we have a little bit more understanding of what the money should be used for and is appropriate for, and created the recreation areas so that we could say, yeah, this is a policy for the county, and this is what we agree these things should be used for. And when we believe that we need to and money is available, we can use these things for special services, right? And that is where we're at. And I led the charge on that one. I felt like it was something we needed to do and to solve some of that problem. We still have to determine in this, what is our policy though? Because we are subsidizing in every one of those scenarios, the members of those service districts that we are members of. So SLVISA and UFSA, because we are not getting credited for all the services that are going to the county in those areas. And the same goes for the MSD. And in the areas that we can identify things that are countywide services, I think we can justify some of that, right? And we do oftentimes, because roads are roads are roads. Everybody needs a good road, right? And services up into the canyons and Rio Tinto, and being able to take care of needs when we're dealing with fires and things like that. Again, there is a benefit there. But this county council is going to need to determine specifically how is it, because we're getting out of municipal services now. We will literally, by the end of 2026, be down to 1,200 people in unincorporated Salt Lake County. Those contracts that some of this money is paying for will go away because they will now be part of cities. And as long as the cities are part of your district, then they will stay as part of it. But if they're not, they will roll off that book and we won't be paying for those anymore. So there are some really intense considerations as we look forward to funding things going forward. And there are some needs as well. I know there's a need to open up another fire station now on the west side by me, right? I don't know if it's sitting empty or if there's just a ambulance there or whatever. There's a fire station out by me. And if there's some ways we could get something open by working with other entities and opening it or whatever else, because I know there's a need there, right? We're going to have to get more creative on how we do business moving forward. And interlocal agreements like that, and where we're supportive of those type of things, might make some sense then to support those type of programs with that centrally assessed money, right? There are a lot of options we have available, but that's what this council is going to have to kind of grapple with. So kind of understanding where the money streams are coming from and how they pay for things is going to be vital in this. So I would suggest that if you're not fully aware and understanding what was just explained, please get aware and understand that, because it's taken me it took me a good probably 18 months to understand the differences between all three of those entities and where the money is coming through. And I see it on a regular basis, sitting on the MSD board and talking about what's going on. So I know we're going to have to talk about the policy issue on this. I know we're going to have to make a determination. And I don't know where the council is on this right now. I personally think we need to fund to the end of what we agreed to for for your cycle that you're in right now, at the level we had agreed to, and I intend to do that. What we do for the next budget cycle as they go into it, because they're not in their budget cycle, they're starting that right now, right? But because we overlap strangely, we're already in that discussion for the other half of that year. So what we do then is something that we need to decide, what are we going to do for that second half, right? Are we looking at, and the mayor's proposing 20% for that second half of our year, which is the first half of their next cycle.
I have a question.
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, so given the scenario that you're proposing, given that the mayor's office is asking time to bring in a facilitator, what can we do? Is what you're proposing now is that we fund exactly what we agreed to through June, and then gives everybody time to become aware of the issues, engage the facilitator, and proceed
for the next cycle. And we could choose to make a determination through their budget cycle on what we'll fund the next cycle. It's just what do we set aside in the meantime as a placeholder until we can come to an agreement of what we fund in the next year of their cycle.
So
And I
Dave,
guess that's kind of where I'm at personally. I don't know where the rest of the council is.
Dave, how do you see that working?
Well, I think you start with the mayor's proposed budget. And the question on the table that you raised, as I understand it, the mayor's proposed budget provides full funding for the next 6 months.
Right.
It doesn't provide full funding, and we can argue whether it's 5 or 10 for the next 6 months, or 10 or 20 for the full year. But that is not written in stone. What is written in stone is the mayor's proposed. And so the question to you is, are you comfortable with using that as a placeholder for the tentative budget? And if you're not, then you need to modify it.
So I propose that we accept the mayor's budget, allowing the full funding through the end of the all of those people under the UF.
All the acronyms.
Yes.
So just to clarify, Anne, your motion is to adopt the mayor's proposed. Okay.
Because it allows for the full funding through June.
Yeah.
But I would like to make sure there's a caveat there that we go back and look at that next cycle and get the real numbers and understand that, and that we look at a possible change if we need to.
And that all happens during the 6 months with the facilitator and all the input to get hard, fast numbers and have a neutral source work through all the issues.
And I would actually like to know some of those numbers before I'm a hard and fast anything on that second half of that year. I'll just
Well,
be
and the
honest.
mayor's proposed did not specify a facilitator, so to the extent that you're comfortable that, you should include it in the motion.
Yeah.
And I will include the facilitator with the caveat that we have a dollar amount proposed to us before the facilitator is hired. That they come to the council and ask for the appropriate funding before hiring the facilitator, rather than hiring the facilitator and coming back and saying, oh, by the way, it was this much.
Yeah, I think that's helpful. Thank you.
Madam Chair, so just clarification on the motion. So we would not discuss an additional contribution as part of the list on the 26th. You're saying we wouldn't review that potential additional contribution probably until our mid-year budget wouldn't be formalized. Is that what you're saying? Okay.
Well, I think there's the opportunity clearly for discussion, but it wouldn't need to act until the mid-year budget.
Right. But I guess just clarification that it wouldn't be part of the list for next week. Right? Okay. I'll second that, all of Ann's caveats included.
Did we get all the events caveats? Did you get those? Okay.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
I hate to complicate matters, but
Oh,
I
boy.
just need a clarification. Okay. So just to be clear, the UFA asked for a specific amount. That was $3,129,150. The mayor's office came back and let's just call it, is recommending that that number should have been something different. $2,971,452, which is a difference of $157,000. And that difference has to do with how we are calculating the revenue number for the rec area versus how UFA is. And that's an issue that we are
That's the one that
hopefully
we
gonna
need to get.
resolved.
You know
It would
what?
be nice
Can
if we
just
could
wait till
resolve that.
next week on this so we can get that resolved, because that is actually a key important finding in knowing how much that is going to be.
Well, so I guess my understanding though is you would be fine for the final 6 months of the current fiscal year. And then we would make a further funding decision as it relates to your fiscal year that begins July 1st, right?
That's correct. And that's very similar to what happened last year.
Yeah.
We didn't know what was going to happen until our budget had already been adopted.
That gives you time to resolve the numbers, involve the facilitator if necessary, and work out all the kinks.
So I guess I don't think it matters if we wait till next week, but I think just recognizing that, I think we've got several months beyond this current
Yes.
budget cycle
We,
to resolve the
we
issue.
do, but can I just make
We need to
one
solve
point?
it before their next budget year, but they're okay for the remainder of this budget year.
But also, don't we have a motion on the table?
We do have a motion
Yeah,
on the
with
table. I
a
just want to
second.
verify that where we're at, so.
To decide what the motion actually says.
Yes. If it needs to be modified is all I was trying to figure out.
As long as they're good for the remainder of their current fiscal year, then I'm good with the motion. And-
Okay.
And I don't think we need to wait till next week.
Okay,
I'm good
could
with
someone
that.
read the motion to me, please?
So the motion specifically was to approve as the mayor's budget as presented, allowing them the budget that we had agreed to for the first 6 months of the year, which ends their fiscal year. And then adjust the second half, but we will come back and relook at that through this process over the next 6 months. Correct? Okay.
That's fine.
Okay.
I'm not going to object. I just want to make sure people understand. When you say the mayor's budget was based on a figure that
Are
we
you
think
a-
has now
well-
changed. And I like sticking with this.
So are
because-
you suggesting that a number that we should be paying for the last 6 months of this year is different now? That's my question to you.
It could be if,
Okay, that's
if
why I
the
was asking.
parties agree to the difference on the revenue.
During your presentation, Catherine, you presented that 6-month number, recognizing the $46,000 lower amount requested.
Okay,
and
that's
you were
fine.
going to provide 50% of that number
okay,
as
you're
part
right.
of the budget
Dave, you're right.
recommended by the mayor.
You're right. Fine.
Darren, go ahead.
Moving on.
Yeah, so I'm hearing what you guys are saying, and I wanted to just clarify for Tony mostly that the way I'm interpreting it is that we would draw half of what was requested for the next 6 months, January to June,
Yes.
for the benefit of the UFA from the general fund. But if you take that approach and the appropriation remains the same as what has been proposed, it would amp up the pressure to get this resolved, because come June of next year, it would create a harder impact for the UFA, right? Because it pushes all of that savings into that next fiscal year. But it also amps up the necessity to resolve the situation.
Yeah.
And I want to make sure, Tony, does that make sense, what I just said? Okay, yeah.
And he's promised not to start looking for another job.
Darren is right, but Lauren, can you do me a favor? Can you pull up my slide deck? And I just want to show everyone what I'm talking about. It's
Slide 11.
It's the one that shows the breakdown for the year. Thank you, Tony. Slide 11.
While Lauren's pulling that up, I'll just characterize what I think I'm understanding from the council, that there is some sympathy to the position that UFSA finds itself in, and there may be a desire to augment to some degree the funding requests, but we want to take time to dig into it, which is why we would look to mid-year to formalize it and maybe make a decision before that, but recognizing that at least for the next 6 months, they are largely whole from our previous contribution, and then we can figure out these issues going forward.
I support
That's
that
what
concept.
I feel like
I just
council's
want to
saying.
make sure everybody understands the details, because
Yeah.
there's one more detail, and this slide will show it to you. Here's what it is. The amount that the current contribution amount, the 2024 amount, is at $3,175,000. Okay. UFA came in and requested a number that was less that number by 46,564. Okay, they
Right.
came in and asked for 3,129. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
The payment schedule shows you that the first half is 50% of what they requested, which is the 3,129,150. Okay, that's fine if that's what we agree. The issue is that 3,129,150 is sourced from a calculation of the gap. If you go back to slide, Lauren, go back to slide 4. There. You see? Total revenue, 749, less expenses, 3.8. There's that 3,129. Their request is equivalent to the gap. Now, Lauren, if you go to the next page. Next page. If in fact the revenue number is 900, not 749, the gap is smaller. So the question is, if that 907 number is correct, should UFA have asked for a lower number, not the 3.129?
But
That's why
regardless
I'm
of that,
How can
regardless
we
of
answer
that,
that
we
when
have,
you've said
we have the
yourself the
budget.
numbers are in dispute?
Because I think within a few days, a week, we're going to be able to resolve that discrepancy. If you all are not interested in giving us that time, you can make that decision, the 50% of what they ask. I'm just trying to disclose all of the facts as what's going on.
So
And I'll
for the sake of
defer to you.
discussion, assuming that everything you say is correct, Catherine, and that we determine what the number is, it doesn't mean that it is resolved as to what the final number is going to be for the last half of the fiscal year. That's still in play, as I understand it. The only thing that we are locking in, as I understand it again, is that the first 6-month payment will be equivalent to 50% of the requested amount from the UFS, for the Unified Fire. And that was on your slide, and that, as I understand it, then that was on slide 11. You had on slide 11 the precise amount.
But
And
I'm
that's
sorry,
consistent with what
Dave,
the mayor has
Dave.
recommended, correct?
No.
Why?
Yeah,
Because,
okay.
okay.
Yes,
If the
all right.
50% amount
It's-
is not
I'm gonna
consistent, then we
cave.
need to know.
I'm
Yeah.
conceding.
So this is what I think Catherine's trying to say. The analysis that Saskia did came in after the mayor's recommended budget. There's a $200,000, $150,000, I guess it is, discrepancy, because my understanding is we didn't have real and personal property being calculated. So that basically means that there's more revenue coming in through property tax into the district than was initially assessed by the UFA. So that discrepancy is going to be carried over into the first half of the year, but this discrepancy has been identified since my budget recommendation. Am I correct, Catherine, with that?
Yeah, that's correct. Other than it's not just a personal property issue, there's other issues as to what could be leading to the discrepancy. But yes, that's accurate.
So, and that could be fine because we're not, as has been pointed out a few times today, these are, we've got a large budget, even though our budget is incredibly limited, hence the action of the council earlier today. So I guess the ultimate question is, does the council care about that discrepancy in the revenue? Because it does impact the first half of the year. And this information has been discovered since my budget recommendation.
But when you say it impacts the first part of the year, it's basically in terms of recognizing whether the gap is 5% or 10% or something else. And the issue on the table is to resolve that in the second half of the year, not the first half. So I think the motion still stands, which is basically saying there is no, from the Unified Fire's perspective, they're going to have enough money to get them through the end of this fiscal year, which is half of the amount they requested. And then the question of the size of the gap will need to be resolved at some point between now and June so that the council will have correct information on what the actual impact of the gap is and what the size of the gap is and whether the revenue numbers are correct as provided by the UFA or as estimated by the county or something between. But the question isn't really whether or not that first 6-month payment is going to be impacted. It's the question of the size of the gap in the second half of the year.
Agreed. The other aspect of that, the other aspect is we're setting an amount that's going to be in the first half of the year. That's that. If for some reason that changes and we spend less, right? Our budgets are a placeholder. So, we're here, we plan to spend the money and this is where it's at. If for some reason we find that number is different for whatever reason and you guys work that out and figure that out, great, we'll figure that out. But we need a number in there. And right now we're going to go with the number that we had agreed to in the first place, I think is what we're going to do. Everybody's okay with that? That was the motion. And then we can move forward from there. And then we'll work on the number for the second half after that. And that was the motion, along with adding the ability to work with somebody and have that brought to the council with the funding mechanism attached so that we can, so we know what the price is and stuff and we can approve that.
And then just a point of clarification. I heard Dave say 50% of the UFA requested, but I heard the motion differently. So could you repeat the motion?
So what she's approved is the first half of the year, as we've agreed to in the budget talks before with UFA. And then the second half of the year, we're going to put a placeholder in and we'll work with them on that specifically.
So it's half of the UFA's recommendation, which is not, well, I guess that is my recommendation because it is the first half. Okay.
Yeah.
Understood.
Okay.
Sorry, I'm getting lost as well.
Okay.
So thank you.
All right, I'm going to call for the vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, that
Madam
passes.
Chair, I need 5 minutes.
Yep,
another
5
subject.
minutes.
So, I'm sorry.
She wants to go eat.
Wayne approached me with the desire to provide a temporary to hire the newly elected treasurer
yes.
during a very busy time of the year so that she could come in and become acquainted with what is going on. And then my good friend to my right, Ralph, told me that it's important for us to have the ability to provide legal advice to newly elected officers of the county. And so what I'd like you to do is, Wayne has come up with $5,000 of underexpend that he can devote to providing on an hourly basis a $45 wage plus Social Security and Medicare for the newly elected treasurer. And he'd like to supplement that with $5,000, so he needs another end-of-year budget adjustment. I would also like to have $1,100 for each of the newly elected council members, so $3,300 end-of-the-year adjustment, so that I can pay them $20 an hour for the time that they will spend, and will provide them with legal access then to the DA's office.
So is that going to the DA's office to cover the legal?
No, it's coming to us because I got to pay their
They need to be an
salary.
employee of the county for the attorney-client privilege to attach.
So these would be temporary employees paid on an hourly basis that would be managed by the respective offices of the treasurer
Can we talk
and the
more about
council.
that one? I'm not prepared
Yep.
to move on that one, but I'm okay with talking with the
Well, then,
treasurer one. So
if
let's
you
move
could-
on that
If
one.
we get a motion for the treasurer, that would be great.
So moved.
I'll second. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? That passes. And
Madam-
we'll talk about the other one.
Well, I have a potential solution. I have underexpend in my discretionary budget, and I would be willing to provide $3,300 to central staff for that purpose.
There you go.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Madam Chair, what time are we coming back?
We are supposed to be back at 1:30.
Okay, thank you.
All right.
See you then.
Recess for lunch, and we're recessing right on time, guys. Nice job.
Thanks, you guys.